All county offices will be closed on Tuesday, December 24th through Wednesday, December 25th in observance of the Christmas holiday. All county offices will reopen on Thursday, December 26, 2019. Come and celebrate the holiday tradition of lights on the lake at Escalante Park. The lights will be up the entire month of December until January 6, beginning from 6 p.m. and will be lit up 7 days a week. Follow us on Facebook at El Paso County Parks and Recreation for upcoming special holiday events happening at Lights on the Lake. All county offices will be closed on Tuesday, December 31st through Wednesday, January 1st in observance of the New Year's holiday. All county offices will reopen on January 2nd, 2020.
The County of El Paso Public Works Department is offering sandbags at no cost or requirements to the public. The sandbags are outside of the facilities and are available 24 hours a day. The location of the county facilities are the following: the Road and Bridge Fabens Warehouse, located at 1331 North Fabens Street in Fabens, Texas, 79838. The Road and Bridge Canutillo Warehouse, located at 191 Canutillo Avenue in Canutillo, Texas, 79835. And the Road and Bridge Montana Warehouse, located at 14698 Van Lane, El Paso, Texas, 79938.
Don't wait in line, pay online. Visit the Financial Recovery Division website at http://www.epcounty.com/budget/financialrecovery.htm to make your payments online or find out more about our kiosk locations. We now accept payments on misdemeanor, felony, and justice of the peace cases.
You can now watch Commissioners Court meetings on YouTube. Go to youtube.com and search for El Paso County Commissioners or El Paso County, Texas. Subscribe to our channels to see our latest videos.
Did you know the County of El Paso's Purchasing Department is responsible for ensuring that all items and services needed by various county departments are purchased in the manner required by the state of Texas? Whether through formal sealed bids or smaller dollar quotations, the county purchasing team is dedicated to finding the best contracting return on your taxpayer dollars. Additionally, the Purchasing Department is responsible for the tracking of inventory within the county and properly disposing surplus through public auctions. For questions about how to become a vendor and compete for county contracts, or to learn more about public auctions, please contact us at telephone number 915-546-2048.
The 346th District Court Judge Angie Juarez Barrid started the El Paso Veterans Treatment Court program in 2012 for veterans and active service members that have been arrested and charged with a felony or misdemeanor criminal offense. To be considered for the specialty court, the statutory criteria includes be a veteran or current member of the United States Armed Forces, including a member of the Reserves, National Guard, or State Guard, and suffer from a brain injury, mental illness, or mental disorder, including PTSD, or be a victim of military sexual trauma, all occurring or resulting from military service. Call Sylvia Serna, Veterans Program Director, at 915-546-2119, or email her at sserna@epcounty.com for any information.
Did you know that the County of El Paso's fixed asset control and inventory disposal is handled through the purchasing department? Throughout the course of each business year, the county holds live public auctions to dispose of aged equipment, vehicles, furniture, and other items that are no longer needed. To find out about upcoming auctions or to learn more about the county's inventory disposal process, contact the purchasing department at telephone number 915-546-2048.
Good morning. Today is Thursday, December 19, 2019. Commissioners Court is meeting in special open session. We'd like to go ahead and start with item number 3 from the regular agenda. Pursuant to the Texas Local Government Code Section 115.021, audit and settle all accounts against the county shown on the attached listing and direct the payment of those accounts. For this item, we just need a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Perez is absent. Commissioner Leon.
Aye.
Commissioner Stout.
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson is absent. Judge Samaniego.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Jessica, real quick before you go on. Judge, Commissioners, we have a public comment item on here. There's a couple things we want to do under that, but we'd like to do it at the very end of the meeting, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Item number 4. Pursuant to the Texas Local Government Code Section 114.023, 114.024, 114.025, and 114.026, please accept the attached presentation and interim financial report for the month ended November 30th, 2019. The interim financial report is located on the internet at http://www.epcounty.com/auditor/publications/monthlyreports.htm.
Good morning, Judge Commissioners. Jim Horvath, County Auditor's Office, Financial Reporting Division. As you can see, our revenues for November were $22 million for all funds, 27 million in expenses. For the general fund, we had 16.8 million in revenues and 21 million in expenditures. This is our monthly condensed financial report that was published in the newspaper. Revenues, again, as you can see, is a breakdown of our revenues for all the different entities, different funds. Property taxes were up 2.6 million over the prior year. Sales tax, 266.
Jen, would you go back up one slide? I'm confused about community corrections, how that's a reverse revenue.
It's a debit balance as opposed to a credit.
Is they're doing adjustments on their books for the fiscal year end.
No, that's because those are agency funds. They're all years and their fiscal year is different than ours.
Okay.
So it happens to be, it's 2 different fiscal years and they're making an adjustment.
So
That's a deprivation.
That explains also the $84,000 one also?
Yeah,
Okay,
and that's
thank you.
sometimes we try not to put the all years with the normal budgeted stuff because it kind of makes a confusing picture, yeah.
Thank you.
So again, is sales tax for November, we were up 266,000. License and permits were up, and charges for services were up 1.8 million.
But can you go back, I'm sorry, on the licenses and permits, I mean, it more than doubled. Betsy, do you have, are those permits the ones that we as a
I
county?
mean, charges and licenses and permits, that's the ones for,
Those are usually mixed beverages.
it's for mixed beverage, and the increase is mainly due to alcoholic beverage permits.
Wow, so we.
More bars.
More than double.
Is it a timing difference or?
More
It looks
likely
like
it's
there's
a
another
timing
timing
difference.
difference too in charges for services. Both of those seem unusually high compared to last year. So I am wondering if it's a deposit
Yeah,
timing.
the charges for
Yes,
services. I don't know
charges
what-
for services, it's the timing difference is last year, remember, we had the Fed
Oh, delay in the federal reimbursement.
delay in the federal reimbursements, so that is what that is due
Okay.
to.
But we don't know why the only thing on licenses and permits, we don't know if there's actually a number volume increase.
No.
Or if it's a timing increase.
I guess you get to find out in this.
I'm just curious, I
relay that
mean,
to
it's
us just to see if there's anything.
it's a big
Yeah, we'd have
difference.
to get that from the tax office.
You could.
Okay, thank you.
Revenues by source, and this just gives you the breakdown of it. Compared to the budget, we're at 6.3% for property taxes, 9.4% for sales tax. Licenses and permits, as you pointed out, was 21% increase. Charges for services was 11% increase. Fines and forfeits, we had a 12% increase. And this is the main sources of revenue, is taxes make up 75% of your fees, your revenue source, with 54% of that being property taxes and 21% being sales tax. And just a recap of our revenues compared to budget. We're up a little bit from last year, as this time last year we were at 6.4%. This year we're at 7.5%.
Can you go back one slide real quick? I just. Sure. 54 to, okay.
Sales and use tax, again, this is just the first month that we collect. There, so we're up a little bit higher than what we had last year, and is,
And you'll see it in next month's report as well.
Yes.
From the auditors, it was up significantly during the month of December.
it was
We
a
really-
22%
Twenty-two
increase.
percent was our increase for the receipts we got this month. Record high. I've never had a spike like that.
What do you think that's
So we reached out to the comptroller's office to find out, was there any, sometimes you'll have adjustments that the state will make, and they'll make that in a single remittance. We're trying to find out now, but we haven't had a response yet.
It's just increased revenues.
Yeah,
Because looking
it's
at their detailed
amazing.
breakdown, it's just on the revenue.
Real significant, which is a good trend to see.
And then our revenues by sources. Expenditures, as you can see here, is we have general fund, 21 million that we've spent for the month, 34 for year to date. Our breakdown of general fund expenditures is salaries make up 62%, fringe benefits 21%, operating expenses 16%, and 0.14% is capital outlay expenditures.
On this one, I'm sorry, that first column, when you look at 62.59 and 62.14,
It's 21 million in salaries, and that's year to date.
if the percentage is lower, yet the actual monies are higher,
It's because it's a percentage of the budget.
Of the general fund.
Yeah.
The general fund budget is
So-
higher this year, so it's a smaller percentage of the total budget. But the physical number, as you compare 21.1 to 21.4, the value is increased.
Because if you look at your fringe, you have a little bit higher on the fringe there in the percentage, and you also have on operating expense is higher than last year.
And also, just to put it in perspective, last year's adopted budget was at 350 million. This year's adopted budget, 380 million. So that'll account for a smaller percentage.
And just to clarify the question on the charges for services, the 1,000,008, that's the first board bill payment we received this year. Last year, we didn't get any board bill payments until January, and it was a $4.6 million hit because they paid us all at once because they were holding it. So you'll see in January, you'll see
It'll look low.
a big difference is why is it less than last January? But the year-to-date will be basically, should be consistent.
Does that also cover, would that also impact the license and permits anyway?
No.
Okay,
No, I
Yeah,
can
because
upload it.
licenses and permits
Okay.
are state.
okay.
They're local fees.
Those are state and local fees, so. And for this year, we've spent so far, year to date, is 9.76% of the budget.
We're losing quorum?
Judge.
oh, sorry.
If you leave, we lose quorum. I just need it.
We can wait, we can wait.
Yeah, we can wait.
We can recess for a few
Recess.
minutes.
Yeah.
Can we just recess for a second?
Yeah, I think we have to.
Recess for a minute.
One second.
Yes, sir.
Out of emergency.
Commissioners, Carl will recess for 5 minutes. Commissioners Court has reconvened into special open session and we left off on item number 4.
All right. To continue is, so far this year, we've spent 9.76% of the budget compared to last year where we spent 10.58 at this time. Again, this breakdown of our expenditures, as you can see, is our higher areas are going to be administration and justice, public safety, and culture and recreation comes up, but it's a smaller budget there. Our expenditures, as you can see, is general government is pretty much spread out, with information technology being the largest one and non-departmental being the second largest. For administration of justice, it's the district attorney, county attorneys, and for public safety, it's the sheriff's department. For other functions, the largest one coming in there is medical examiner. Again, the breakdown of our expenditures is public safety is 47% of our budget of the expenditures. Administration of justice was 24%, and general government was 22%. All other functions were 4%. Fund balance. And not much change here from what we presented last month.
Actually, it did go up.
Yeah.
It did go up a little bit. I'm projecting 92 million for the fiscal year ended. And I'm just taking what we've posted. I don't expect any major adjustments. So whatever's in the system right now that we've posted, that's what I'm basing the year-end amount. And then for the end of fiscal year 20, I'm projecting a drawdown of about $16.9 million. But that's based on a lot of appropriations that may or may not be expended, totaling about $51 million. Flood controls, stormwater, and all that.
Economic Development
Yeah.
Impact Fund.
And you're gonna be talking about your long-term capital plan. Some of those may end up materializing or maybe deferred to your capital plan and be funded under INS, but that's to be determined. So it's an ongoing analysis, and we're working with budget policy. We don't have a lot of data as of the end of November for revenue, so once we close December, I'll do my projections, and then in January and in February, we'll have an update with our first out-the-door estimate of revenues for the 2021 budget cycle.
Also, something that we're starting to do, just a process improvement that I think is really important. We're starting, and this is preliminary, but we've been working with our, especially with Public Works, who has a lot of the major capital projects, that we want to start creating cost drawdown schedules in the contracts, so that we'll know on major expenses what our drawdown schedules will be, so that we can share that information with the auditor's office, so we get more. Right now he has to assume we're going to spend it all.
Yeah, so we can invest maybe a little bit longer term.
Right.
And make a little more interest.
Right. And so it's something we're really working to improve on, and you'll start seeing that come through more often in large contracts.
That's one of the concerns I had, like I was speaking to Wally yesterday, about when we do bonds, that do we draw down the full amount at one time, or do we draw it down based on how much we can use, or based on the capacity? And the reason I asked that question and concern is the fact that you draw all the money down, you're paying interest on the whole amount.
Right.
But we're not using that amount. So we draw it down based on what we have the capacity to do. So I hope,
Exactly.
in fact, I want to suggest that we make it a matter of policy that we do that in all future endeavors.
And so that we do it like with issuance in tranches. We determine how much we need, and then every 6 months or whatever.
Exactly.
You just pull it down as you need it. You don't have to worry about IRS and arbitrage. It's not a cash flow problem.
And it's based on the project. If it's a construction project, we're not, one is, do we have the capacity here in-house? But then if externally, as far as the contractor that we may be doing the work for us, based on the other work that's going on around the city and the county, that contractor may not be able to do it within a reasonable, what we consider a reasonable time, based on our schedule, but based on their schedule, based on the workload they have, it may be different. So I want to suggest that, Judge, that in the future that we establish a policy in that regard, that we program and draw down based on the need and capacity.
And we have that policy on the agenda today, so when we're discussing that policy, we can discuss making sure that's in there.
Perfect. For sure.
Thank you.
I have another question.
Yes.
I know it's hard to predict and project, but in regards to the, you talked about on your report here was the county attorney's office and the district attorney's office as far as cases they may have as far as expenditures. How do we, how do we project or project the amount of money we want to spend, expenditures in cases that they may have for a year?
I can speak from experience, having been in that role in the past, and an auditor's office. But also what we do is we look at the historical spend on large cases where they have pending capital murder cases. We discuss that with the prosecutorial team to find out what's in the queue, how many cases are in the queue, how complex they may be. We consult with them when we're formulating the budget recommendations, and then throughout the year, we're forecasting those expenses on a very regular basis. It's somewhat predictable, and we also see some cyclical nature. Like in December, when the holidays are here and the courts are shutting down for a few weeks, we see a drop off. So it's a fairly predictable number, and we work real close with the council on that.
Well, particularly in the case of August 30th.
Yes, sir.
That's a biggie right there. For we don't know how long it's going to go. So in the regard, how much money is going to be expended. So particularly in the advent, they just added another attorney to the team. So that's going to be an additional expense that was not projected from the beginning.
We actually did project a cost based on what other mass shooting trials have costed, have cost other communities.
Right.
And so we use that information as well, but we have, on the prosecutorial side, we've applied for funding to help.
In the judiciary as well. That's on change of venue as well?
It's based on all of those expenses, yes.
We did put estimates in for change of venue as well, sir.
Okay.
For transportation of both prosecution, defense, and witnesses, and this has a very high witness count.
And I don't want to stray too far from the agenda topic, but that's, we have accounted for those.
And also too, as for the defense costs, you'll see those under public defender, not under county attorney or district attorney.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we please have a motion to accept the report?
So moved. Second.
Commissioner Perez?
Aye.
Commissioner Leon?
Aye.
Commissioner Stout?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Judge Samaniego?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 5, receive a presentation regarding the 2019 staffing analysis conducted at Constable Precincts 1 through 7 and take appropriate action regarding personnel for each of the Constable Precincts as applicable.
Good morning, Judge. Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Melissa Carrillo with Human Resources. We're just going to pull this presentation up. So this morning, I do want to first commend the constables and open this item by really thanking all 7 precincts. For the past few months, we've been really working hard together on coming up with something that we think we can present jointly to you all. And so this morning, we'd like to present our analysis and our recommendations. So if you look at the current constable staffing, you'll see that within the county, we have 7 precincts. And you'll see where we have elected constables, deputy constables, and sergeants within each of those precincts. Depending on the precinct, some areas have more deputy constables versus others. What's important to note on the staffing is you have 2 precincts that have an administrative assistant intermediate currently. Those are precinct 3 and precinct 5. In total, you have 34 staffing serving your constable precincts within the county. Just a history of this project. In October 29th of last year, we had our first budget planning meeting. In that meeting, it was all representatives of the precinct, myself, members of county administration, as well as Commissioner Leon. And we had a frank discussion to really discuss what do we want to do? How are we going to handle staffing requests by each constable precinct? Because what we had started to see was each year there were requests coming in. And we wanted to get ahead of it. We wanted to look at it and say, what is the right answer across all 7 precincts? In 2019, what we committed to doing was submitting an RFP to see if an outside vendor would come in and analyze the operation and make a recommendation for us. However, we had 2 unsuccessful attempts. Unfortunately, there is not the expertise out there that was able to bid and serve in this capacity. So what we did was we came together again, we got creative and we said, we have the resources internally to do this, and that's what we committed to do. On August 22nd of this year, we met together with the constables and we said we need representatives from each of the precincts to conduct a study on their own. And what that study would mean would be go out and see what are the tasks that you all are spending the majority of your time doing, what other tasks are you doing, and then consistently come up with the tasks that you believe all 7 precincts should be committed to doing for the county and its residents. And so that's what we did for the past few months. And I will skip through this because I got ahead of myself. But at the time of the budget planning meeting last year, just to remind the Commissioners Court, the factors that we were looking at when analyzing staffing for constable precincts included what were the ratios per T-Col officer, what was the crime per precinct, warrants issued. We also talked about revenue dollars, caseload changes, and things of that notion. So when we go to this August 22nd meeting and we look at the internal study, you'll see that the major goals and expectations were to understand what the internal study needed to do. We wanted to talk about time and motion and how that would be handled. We assigned committee duties, and the internal timeline was also solidified. We knew that by this period of time, November, December, we wanted to be before Commissioners Court presenting our recommendations. It's important to note that HR and members of county administration, specifically Mr. Jacob Millis behind me, were assisting them throughout the past few months. We had several check-in meetings. So before I turn it over to the data, I do want to let you know you have several members of the constables here today. Again, this is a joint project. We worked on it together, and Mr. Millis was able to take the data that they themselves were able to track and put it into an analysis where we could project some different things. This was very helpful in coming up with a recommendation that we thought would be best for the county as well as for each of the precincts. So I want to turn it over to Jacob so that he can speak to his data, and then we'll resume to conclude about recommendations. Jacob.
Good morning, Judge. Good morning, Commissioners. Jacob Miles with County Administration.
Good morning.
So this first graph, and my graphs are kind of dense, so if you need me to stop at any time, please let me know. This first graph gives you a breakdown of the tasks on the left, number of tasks, and the hours spent on those tasks are on the right. This is sorted in decreasing order by time. So here you can see that constables spend vast majority of their time on civil papers. Then that's followed by court security sessions.
Can you explain what civil papers means?
Absolutely, I brought that with me. So civil papers, they're papers regarding kind of like evictions, papers regarding civil cases. So they have to make 3 diligent attempts on civils and 2 diligent attempts on FEDs to serve them. Maybe Councilor McGrath wants to explain what a civil paper.
You're right.
I'm exactly right. Yes, I'm right. So it's all papers regarding civil cases. So maybe they think they do
serving people with papers in regard to their civil case. That's what civil papers mean.
Exactly.
Can I say something? Good morning, Constable Bernal. On the civils, there's several civil papers, different kinds. So one of them, of course, that we do the most is the evictions. So the person, whether they're getting sued by, or let's say, for example, they're getting sued by somebody that a mechanic, or they're suing a mechanic for non-performance. So then on those civil papers, we have to make 3 attempts. to
serve them.
To serve them. Everybody has to have a right to get notice that they're being sued. So you can't just go sue somebody and then never notify them. So we have to make diligent attempt to notify them on both on civil small claims and FEDs.
FED is?
Forcible entry and detainer, which is the evictions. Right. So that's where all the civils, and then there's several other ones, but those are the main ones.
Thank you for the education.
Thank you, Constable.
Jacob, does
Yes,
that
sir.
include their administrative work in doing that, or just? the
Yes,
actual
absolutely.
service?
So it includes the entire process. So both the administrative aspect and the
Oh,
actual
wait.
tangible going out there and doing the actual job. You're exactly right. So they also spend a lot of time on court security sessions, on administrative duties, and then on warrants executed and warrants attempted. Now, the next slide sorts this by the actual number of tasks instead of how long those tasks take. So again, you see the vast majority of what they do in terms of number of tasks are civil papers. They also perform clerical duties, warrants attempted, administrative duties, and warrants executed. So you can see that even though it doesn't take as much time, the second most number of tasks that they do fall under clerical duties. Now, what I also would like to draw your attention to is the fact that this, from what I understand, is what the court has always wanted these constables to be doing, are their civil papers, their warrants attempted, warrants executed. And so you see that this is exactly what our constables are doing. Most of their time is spent doing what the court wishes them to do. And a lot of kind of the ancillary activities or the activities that maybe may not have as top priority, they are falling way at the bottom of these graphs. So they're not spending a whole lot of time on maybe community events or in terms of accidents. So this shows that the constables are doing what the court wishes them to do.
Jacob, when
Yes,
you
sir.
say that the court wishes them to do, what, do we have something that we've expressed to what they should be doing?
Yes, sir, and Ms. Keller can explain that to you.
So statutorily, it says that constables' offices are created and that their statutory responsibilities are to provide the bailiff duties for the JPs and to serve the papers and collect on the warrants, I believe. But they are licensed peace officers. And so what we've always heard from the constables are, I'm a licensed peace officer. I take an oath to do certain functions. And so they say if I see something happening as I'm driving down the road, I'm obligated. And so there's always been this issue from a staffing perspective on what we expect to staff them for versus what their licensed peace officer gives them the ability to do. And they actually take an oath to do.
And this shows that we're in alignment with our expectations.
Correct.
Can I address that, please? Can I address that?
It's Constable Summers.
Pardon me, good morning, I have a really bad cold, so bear with me here. Mrs. Keller is absolutely correct, but the other issue we have is that we have constituents who contact us in reference to wanting additional items. And so as elected officials, we can't say, or even as peace officers, we can't say, well, no, that's the police department's job, no, that's, our constituents contact us constantly now. Even things as simple as asking for radar enforcement in an area because they're having problems in school zones. Our amazing police department, as you all know, they're understaffed, so they don't have the ability to always be where they're needed. So I know all of the precincts, every single one of them, are very good at augmenting and assisting the citizens with what they need. As peace officers, that is part of our duties. And as servants to the community, that is part of our duty. So it's not just if we see something going down the street, it's when our constituents contact us, they expect service from us as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So going back to a question you had earlier regarding, does this incorporate the administrative aspect and the actual going out there and completing the task? And so what if we gave the 5 precincts that do not currently have an administrative staff, what if we gave them an administrative staff to kind of offload all those administrative tasks? And so in essence, these constables are working their backsides off with what they're doing, but some of those tasks incorporate things that they're not specifically specializing in, such as the clerical aspect. And so if you provide a clerical person, you will increase the marginal product of labor of the constables and their deputies. So what we did was we met with all the constables and the 2 admin assistants that we currently have in precincts 3 and 5, and we went down the list and saw every single task, what proportion of the work could an administrative person do for each of those tasks. Then all the time we saved, which was 8.6 hours across all the tasks, we redistributed 3-to-1 ratio for warrants attempted and warrants executed, because we feel that that would be kind of the most logical place that we would want the redistribution of those hours to go to. So 75% would go to warrants attempted and 25% would go to warrants executed. That would result in a roughly 36% increase in the number of warrants executed, and that's the worst case scenario. That's assuming it takes 3 attempts. Sometimes it'll take just 1 attempt and that baseline will go up, but they'll also have over 300% more warrants attempted. And this will assist them in clearing their warrant backlog. Now, civil papers, as far as my understanding, must be done as they come in. So you cannot have a backlog of civil papers. But there is a backlog of warrants to attempt and to execute, and this would assist them in getting through that backlog, ceteris paribus, of course. So here we see on the left, again, it was the original distribution of the tasks. And on the right, you see how those would be adjusted if we removed all the clerical aspects of each of those tasks. And those would be done by the administrative assistant. This is the exact same thing, but now you'll see it and sorted by the right side. So before, when civil papers was the biggest kind of task grabber, now you see warrants attempted will consume the biggest proportion of their tasks. And I believe that's what we want. We want them to be able to attempt more warrants because that will get rid of the warrant backlog. They'll still have those civil papers, and those will just come in and be dealt with as they come in, just like they are now. And the number of warrants executed will also increase. And that's the worst case scenario there. And here you see at the bottom, clerical duties then becomes obsolete in terms of the deputies and the constables themselves. Now that is a best case scenario because that's already assuming that the admin person has a perfect understanding of the entire process. There will be training involved, and so that will just decrease over time until eventually they'll be able to consume over 90% or 95% of the actual clerical tasks. But that's kind of where we want to be at the end, because they'll need to be trained. I remember when I went through Odyssey the first time doing our risk assessment validation study, it took myself and Jose DeBoer, the other data analyst, a long time to kind of go through the process and look at a criminal history and look at research for an Odyssey. And so it's going to take some time to get down. So they're still going to have to do some of the tasks, but as time goes on and as they're trained, they'll be able to relieve them completely of those clerical tasks. Here is the same distribution in terms of the time spent. So again, currently, most of their time is spent on civil papers. And when you readjust it, the time spent will still be majority on civil papers, but they'll have more time to spend on warrants attempted. That went down from the middle of the pack to now third. So they'll be able to spend a significantly higher portion of their time attempting warrants. And then, by extension, executing the warrants as well.
Is this the part where we're supposed to ask?
No, I'm giving you time to look at your graphs, and people at home who are watching on YouTube right now, I know they're all watching, my mom's probably watching, to make sure that they all see exactly, have a chance to see exactly what we're presenting here. All right, here's a breakdown by precincts now of their tasks. And this I think is interesting because it shows that our precincts are not homogeneous. They do have differences within them. For instance, we learned that Precinct 3 has a significantly higher number of court security sessions because not only do they provide court security for JP3, but they also provide security for the district and the county courts. So they're unique in that regard.
Jacob, can you
Yes, sir.
Explain why they provide security for the courts upstairs?
As far as I know, they've been asked to, but I believe I'll run up and shed more light on why.
Yeah, throw it to me. Yeah. We just like any other law enforcement, we're asked to help out, we'll help out. Just like when we're asked to help out with parking, we're glad to do it. If we have the time and we have the resource to do it, then we'll do it, or we'll find some time. But sometimes they'll have large cases where they need just one person. They don't want to have to hire somebody to come in, and they might need one person for just half a day or a couple of hours while they're doing the Vodire or something like that. And they'll just ask us to come in for a couple of hours. So that's why we're a little bit higher on the court security here.
Or a bailiff is called off sick and they can't find a replacement, so they'll call you.
Yes, that too, but it's mainly to just assist the bailiffs. We're not there to help to do bailiff work. We usually just to replace them. We usually just assist the bailiff with security.
And we actually have a fund for temporary bailiffs.
Right. Yeah. So we don't really, when they call for that, actually they hardly ever call to assist to when a bailiff is out sick or anything, but they do call us to help out. Just a couple of hours to bring in the jury and do the Vodire and then send them out. We're just there as security, not doing any other bailiff work.
Thanks. So this next graph is in the projection of how the number of tasks would increase based on our redistribution 3-to-1 ratio of warrants attempted to warrants executed. 3 and 5 are not on here because they already have an administrative person, and so we didn't feel it would be confusing to project them even though they already have the admin assistant person. So it's just precincts 1, 3, 4, 6, and 7.
1, 2, 4, 6, and 7.
Okay, I'm sorry, I lied. Sorry. 1, 2, 4, 6, and 7. And so here you can see it's based on that redistribution, 75% attempted, 25% executed. Now, of course, the constables are free to redistribute the savings that they would incur when having an administrative assistant as they please. But this was just the way we could do it consistently and the way that it was brought up in terms of our meetings with the constables. This is what they want to get done. They want to get rid of that warrant backlog.
Jacob, when you compared, I don't know if you might have already presented this, but when you compared those that have an administrative person there, do you show the results of what you're shooting for the ones that don't have? And does it reinforce that having administrative actually achieves what you're looking for on the other?
So here you can see with 3 and 5 in there, you see warrants attempted, 15% of precinct 3, 50% of their number of tasks are warrants attempted. And 11% of precinct 5 is warrants attempted. So if you want to really answer that question, you'd have to go back to see before they were hired if that number increased, which was outside of this study. So now we can measure that. If we give them all admin judges now, then we can measure, do they increase in terms of the warrants attempted? And that I recommend to be the metric for this position is, do the number of warrants attempted increase? And will their backlog clear ceteris paribus? So if their incoming number of warrants increase, then you don't necessarily expect a decrease because their clearance rate will just stay at whatever it is now because they have an influx of warrants. But if it stays the same, or if it goes down in terms of incoming, then you definitely expect this backlog to clear at a higher rate than what it was at this point.
And that's something that we would then monitor going forward
Exactly.
and report back on. And meet with the constables on about how the progress is coming.
Because in essence, that's the proof of the pudding, right? If you have an administrative, are you achieving? Because sometimes you do get administrative, and they get lost on doing more things, and then if I'm not taking away from the.
And you all will recall, in the past, we have done that. We have given administrative support to the constables before, and we've pulled them and moved them to other offices, depending on how other things are turning out, how the numbers are showing.
Okay.
Judge and Commissioners, if I may, Melissa Carrillo, Human Resources. So one of the things that we have been talking about collectively as a team with the constables is, in a perfect world, based on Jacob's projections, if an administrative assistant was granted to the remaining 5 precincts, then this is what would happen. And the really nice thing about it is any new position the Commissioners Court grants, every county department is responsible for submitting a quarterly staffing adjustment request form saying, thank you commissioners for this position. Let me tell you if it's hitting those marks that I thought it would. For 2 years, they must submit every quarter a staffing adjustment request form showing, or a justification form showing that it did in fact do what we thought it would do. And so as Ms. Keller just explained, we've talked with the committee and we said, if the court is supportive of this, for the next 2 years, for 8 times, you will be able to now have your metrics because of these projections, and you will be able to measure to see, is it really doing what it said it would do? And we would bring that back to the court over the course of this project. And if it doesn't do, if our projections were wrong, if we fail and it doesn't do, then we'd have to discuss that and say, did we get it wrong? Do we need to reassign these personnel elsewhere? Because the idea is, let's give them the resources they need to make their jobs more effective and efficient. And even in speaking with them, you know, they've historically asked for deputies, some have asked for admin assistants, but we've talked as a team and we've said, we realize that, and they're in the audience, we realize they still probably want deputies, they still want additional. This doesn't make them entirely whole, but it gets them that much closer to zero needs. And one thing we talked about as a team as well is that this is across the county. All departments struggle with resources. All departments could use a few more bodies. So could our constables. But this idea is a creative idea that really helps to shift the distribution of their workload so that they're focusing their efforts where they want as deputies, where they want their efficiencies to hit, where it matters for the county. This is an idea we have. I think we're in consensus about what it could do. But the really good thing is we now have metrics to hold ourselves accountable to, just to make sure that they're actually working.
So I have a question. How do we decide what the number of warrants served and executed should be? Is there an industry standard, or is it just we're taking an arbitrary number out of the air and
We're taking current performance based on this.
It's taking current performance and projecting improved performance per precinct. And there's so many factors that affect each precinct, right? We've looked at this. You have some precincts that have JPs that are highly criminal case, highly civil case. You have others that are responsible for much more square miles, so it takes them longer to get to what they need to do. We have more dense populations than we have in other precincts. So there's so many factors affecting what those benchmarks look like. But as Ms. Keller just explained, it's taking what they've done. This data is based on 3 years. So it's taking their current performance today, benchmarking it and saying, how can we improve it over the future?
On a lot of the discussions that we've had with criminal justice, the tours that I've taken, we talk about a tremendous amount of backlog of warrants that have not been served. Is this going to address that as well, to see if we can expedite that, or is that different?
This is JP warrants.
Only, but they don't help out with any of the.
You can, but you're focused on your own, correct?
No, ma'am.
Oh, you do all of them?
Good morning, Constable Oscar Ugarte, Precinct 1. When we work warrants, for example, in my precinct, we run it by zip codes. So we go through Odyssey, we do a warrants check, and we run a zip code. Whatever warrants pop up in that zip code, that's what we address. So we might deal with only misdemeanors or felonies or combined. Sometimes some subjects have misdemeanor and felony warrants. So if it's in our area and we're working that area, we're gonna execute whatever warrant is outstanding.
Am I correct in saying that there is a huge backlog of warrants?
There is, I think the last time, the last warrant operation that we worked together with the sheriff's office, there was, I think, 88,000 outstanding warrants here in El Paso County.
But I think that should be a consideration, because that just.
But is it just constables that are serving the warrants, or is it that sheriff's deputies as well?
The sheriff's department also has a warrants department, and they work on the warrants. But it's just so many out there.
And Judge, that is a correct assumption. Constable Bernal is going to speak, but one of the things I also want to remind the court is a lot of this is also contingent upon the judge and the JP judges as well. You may have some judges who execute warrants much more quickly than other JP judges, and so the constable workload comes from what is in the system. So if you have judges that issue warrants more timely than others or hold off on warrants, the warrant workload is expected to decrease, but there is that other factor of the judges and the JP work as well.
Yes, Constable Bernal, we can't just concentrate on the warrants because there are precincts who do very little warrants, but they have tons of civil papers. So being one of the constables that has a clerk, I have seen how a clerk or administrative aide can help, because the deputies come in, let's say they went and served a civil paper, all they have to do is come in and turn it into him, and he inputs it into the system, returns it to the JP. Also, my clerk picks up all the civil papers and brings them back, enters them into the system, and then all the deputies have to do is pick them up and go out and serve. They don't have to spend time, because each paper is put in by the JP, and then we have to input it into our system that we have it. So all that takes time. So if they have 20 papers to go out and serve, that's just, let's say, 10 minutes for each paper that they have to input. And we're not talking even warrants. So on the warrants, they have to research before going out to execute those warrants, because there might be 88,000 out there, but there's some of those that are from Mexico, which we cannot execute. There's some of those that are been there in the system for years and years, and so we can't execute those because they've already moved and moved and moved. And we sometimes will go in there and go back to some of those and try to see if they've popped up somewhere else, but sometimes we just can't do it.
I think the least we could do is that we don't add to the backlog.
Right.
You know, getting to the backlog, I understand all the different circumstances, but we shouldn't be adding more and more, because I think that's a huge flaw in our system. Have a warrant and nobody gets served, and they feel that nothing's going to happen. And the bail bondsmen's one of their biggest claims is that whatever we're doing, we're creating a backlog. So it looks really good that we're doing it at face value, but that we're not looking at how we're clogging up our system with warrants and so forth. So even if from this point on, you're starting to not add to that problem, I think that's a good path.
Right, so what the clerk does, not only, so that's why I said we can't really concentrate on the warrants, but on the time that gives the deputies to go out and do other things that can help execute warrants, serve when other precincts that have lots of civil and can execute those a lot quicker. And then, in which case doesn't backlog the JP, because we're serving them, they're coming in, and they're going through the system a lot faster.
Okay, thank you.
And all of that Constable Bernal is saying, we conducted on-site analysis. So for the court's information, although we worked with the committee and they turned in their tasks, and they said for the past 3 years, this is what I've done, which is what generates that column on your far left. HR went out and conducted ride-alongs. We got in patrol cars. We went to offices. And as Constable Bernal just mentioned, he is one that has an administrative assistant, it was observed that the deputies would literally walk in, swap papers, walk out, go execute, walk in. That was observed. Whereas in other precincts, that was not observed. You saw the deputies behind a computer, typing, working, researching, spending quite a bit of their time performing that administrative function. Whereas with Precinct 3, it was very observed, where it was a swap of a hand, papers in a hand, and they were back on the streets to do what they need. And I really want to ensure the court knows, because we wanted to validate the data in some form, and so every precinct spent time with various HR professionals conducting ride-alongs and looking at on-site analysis.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So this is the final chart, and it basically shows the same thing by precinct if based on projections, but this is based on hours and time. And you'll see before and after and what it would look like. So tasks and hours is where we spent the time of our analysis. But in wrapping up, as we discuss, and of course if the court has any questions, our recommendations at this point is to authorize 5 new administrative assistant or administrative specialist positions, which are GS16. And we also want to talk about authorizing 1 reclassification of the existing admin assistant intermediate position within Precinct 3 to an administrative assistant senior position. The reason for this is because since that skill set has already been derived, it is the first precinct in which the court authorized an admin assistant. They know their job. They've been doing it for a few years. We've observed them and how they've been able to help with the efficiencies of that precinct. And so one of the recommendations we also came up with was making that person the lead person, so that as we onboard 5 new administrative assistants, they're not all starting from scratch wondering, what are the best practices? What are the procedures? How do I do my job? We have 1 expert, if you will, already within the constable precincts that could serve in a lead capacity, help them develop procedures, help provide the training, be a resource as they need, so that those consistent best practices are sold across the board rather than reinventing the wheel amongst all these 5 different individualized precincts. And again, this was discussed as a team. These are our recommendations. The impact for this project is a full year impact is $260,832. During budget hearings for fiscal year 20, Commissioners Court set aside $250,000 for the study of this project and for any personnel recommendations that came from it. And so this is where we're at. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to take them. Members of each precinct are behind me today if you have any specific questions for them as well.
Looks very comprehensive, a lot of work.
We had a lot of fun.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
For the most part.
There were some other moments, but we had fun, yes.
Commissioner Perez?
Could you go back to the slide with the warrants that were listed there? I mean,
The projection?
yeah,
Is it this one by task or by hour?
right. So you take precinct 6, which is the largest of the constable precincts, and the constable in this precinct has to work with 2 JPs. I mean, why is it that you have 0 when they're serving arguably the most population? Is it because I'm assuming the sheriff's department executes warrants in those?
That was the data that they provided to us.
So all of this data is based on what they provide. So if Constable Garcia would like to speak more to that, or anyone from his precinct, but the data that we have, the numbers we have are based on their performance data they've been tracking for the past few years. So which part are you asking, if it's 0?
Warrants attempted, down towards the bottom, and then you have precinct 4, which has a large chunk. I mean, just sort of an overall observation and something that I've mentioned previously. You know, we're in my opinion, I think we're working with antiquated maps. I don't know how long these the JPs and the constables have been carved out in this way, but as the constable mentioned, you know, if they're executing warrants based on the zip codes it is that they serve. It seems to me then that there needs to be really some analysis on the equalization of the population it is that they're serving, because then it's going to be grossly unfair to a precinct like Precinct 6, where they have 2 judges that they're serving, and probably more people per each precinct, each voting precinct, you know, versus another precinct where perhaps the number of individuals is significantly less. But I mean, you know, there's 4 commissioners precincts, and there's essentially 8 JPs. When you look at District 6 or Precinct 6 that has 2, But I think, we're not really looking at that. I think at some point, that's gonna need to be part of the equation as the way that we redistribute the population, maybe when the census comes up. And we look at that, but I mean, I guess it doesn't surprise me that when you look at precinct 4, which is in Commissioner Leon's area, I mean, 79936, I think, is the most densely populated precinct in the United States. And so if we're doing stuff based on, or executing warrants based on zip code and those that pop up, I mean, it would seem that those that are serving, fewer population are going to have the ability to execute more warrants than those who are serving large populations, they may not have the opportunity.
So if I may, so Commissioner, we're, another project Jacob is working on is we've been evaluating caseloads by JPs. We've also been doing comparative caseloads. If there were less precincts, how would it impact the caseloads by JP? We've compared those caseloads to other jurisdictions. They're all the top counties in Texas we've compared to their caseloads, are the majority of top counties in Texas. We've had preliminary conversations with the JPs about that. We do have that project in our schedule, if you will. We also are evaluating how much of an impact the recent legislative change that gave JPs the ability to hear up to $20,000 value cases. It was 10 and now it's 20. So we're evaluating how much of an impact that has overall on their caseloads. But that is something I do believe we have scheduled for 2022.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay.
After the census.
After the census to complete and bring back a recommendation to Commissioners Court on the number of JP precincts that we should have, which would also impact the number of constable precincts.
But then, I would imagine administrative staff as well, because I mean, if we're assigning, just kind of, if we're doing like sort of one administrative assistant per JP precinct, but they're serving an area that has far less population, which is going to be the case because I mean, the maps that we're working with are significantly antiquated. I mean, the population, I don't know if this was carved out in 2005 or it is significantly different than it is today in 2019. I just think that's something that we have to take into consideration, is just the sheer number of residents that are being served in each of these precincts. Because I think that certainly affects civil papers or their ability, how many civil papers they're able to execute, how many warrants they're able to execute, just based on the number of population. I mean, I would imagine, here at the central precinct, the JP3, that again, the population, I wouldn't be surprised, would be 30% of that of what is in precinct 6. And yet we're looking at, allocating an administrative assistant or they already have an administrative assistant versus, an area that's, in terms of density. That's what I'm saying. I just don't want to get too focused in terms of precinct. I know that's the system we have now, but I think we have to start looking towards the future of what's the best way that we're going to allocate resources in terms of where the residents are. I'm sure Constable Garcia could talk about just not only just the land size that he has to work with, but just now the increasing number of residents that they have to serve in that area.
One of the things that, I might be wrong, Constable Garcia, but something that may be skewing the numbers a little bit is, let's say we have somebody that's visiting cattlemen's, commit some sort of violation, but they live on the west side. So that warrant would actually be served by somebody on the west side. Is that correct, or?
Not necessarily. Good morning, Javier Garcia, Constable Precinct 6. Not necessarily. If something happens in our precinct, we will actually go out to the west side and take care of the warrant. As far as why our warrant numbers are down, keep in mind we do have 2 courts. I am short-staffed. Our courts run Monday through Friday, both courts. So that takes 2 deputies right off the top of my shift. We're just short-staffed. I think all precincts have seen a increase in civil papers this year. Usually our courts run Monday through Thursday, and then Friday we take time to do our evictions, or any other important papers that we have.
And I guess, is that something that was analyzed here in terms of the number of court cases? Because I mean,
It's court security sessions?
Yeah, I believe it was.
No, but I think it's, the point well taken is that we can't have an identical situation sort of regardless of the number of residents. It should be appropriate that the study looks at, you know, if you have more residents, then you look at it different and not have like a sort of across the board kind of personnel staffing.
Correct.
I mean, because also like when you have DPS, you know, DPS. I mean, you know, the state legislature has allocated $800 million for border security initiative, and really all it's resulted in is just increased tickets for everybody.
Correct.
And a lot of that's going to come out in the unincorporated territory because they don't want to go into the territory of a municipality necessarily so much that's served by, you know, a large police department. So, you know, something like in JP6 and your constable's precinct, I mean, you're going to have a whole bunch of cases. I mean, I can see why you're in court most of the time because, I mean, you're going to have just the sheer volume of cases compared to other areas is just going to, I mean, be probably tenfold than what it is anywhere else.
Correct. Yeah, the majority of our court covers traffic cases from DPS, Sheriff's Office, School District Police. So that takes up most of our court security time.
Let me just say that DPS is in the city. DPS is in my neighborhood. DPS is on 54. That's the route I take to come to work every day. I come to this direction. DPS is out there day and night. In addition to PD, the constables. So to say that the lion's share is that the DPS is not out there, they are in our area.
Well, I'm just saying, I think if you were to do a comparison of the number of court cases that appear in JP6 compared to any other JPs, I'd be, I'm sure, willing to bet that the number of tickets that DPS issues in that particular precinct far exceeds. I wouldn't be surprised if all of them combined. Right.
And we have that kind of data breakdown in our precinct comparison. And definitely you see very high numbers in precinct 6 and also in precinct 7. The two outside edges of town.
You have a considerable number of DPS citations. Can I address something?
Well, you know,
come on.
JPs, I mean, the constables are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not, you say that the lion's share of traffic tickets, you say it's just their core function is just to sit out there and do traffic control, like tickets. That's one thing, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that what the core functions that they're supposed to be doing as far as the warrants, what kind of papers we're talking about? Civil papers, things of that nature. So while DPS may be writing more tickets, but is a primary function, yeah. Constables or peace officers, but are they out there just doing what DPS does? Traffic control, writing tickets? I don't think we're saying that.
No, I'm saying that I think it's, I'm sorry, that they write. I'm just saying go into the JP's court. Right, so like, right.
Go ahead.
Melissa correctly stated earlier that in the past, precincts have lost, or precinct has lost an administrative assistant because of the warrant situation. I'd like for the commission to please keep in mind that our warrant availability, our warrant service is based on what our judges are doing. It used to be where all the judges would do a warrant and they would input them into the system. Somehow, some of the judges have gotten away from that. The warrants are not put into the system anymore. They're held for specific precincts. I'd like to see us go back to where the warrants are put back into the system by all the JPs. It's their office, their say so. But one of the issues that I fell upon is when Kelly Dixon was brought in as the JP for Precinct 7, she immediately ceased doing warrants. She did 0 warrants, well, I can't say 0. She did a handful of warrants in the 3.5 years that she was there. Therefore, my productivity went from almost $200,000 a year in warrant recovery down to about $60,000 a year in warrant recovery. So my staffing was based on what she decided to do. Now that Judge Fritzie is back in, I have to give her a lot of credit because she got on the ball and she is producing warrants hand over fist. We have stacks and stacks and stacks of warrants that we are trying to execute out there. And she does also put them into the system so everybody has access to those warrants. When my guys spend an awful lot of time in doing administrative work, where things like budget, well, we all work on that, but that when the papers come in, there is by statute steps that we must take with those papers. They must be time-stamped, they must be entered. Every time they make an attempt, that attempt must be put into the system. So there's a great deal of time that goes into everything that the constables do administratively. We're starting to go off onto the warrant issue. The constables, everything that we do has to be documented by statute. So we're looking at having a full-time admin assistant is not only going to behoove the constable's office as far as productivity and warrants, but in everything that we do. It's going to put our guys out in the field where they should be, the boots in the field, where they should be, by far greater amounts of time than what they're doing now. The way that our court is set up, we have morning session, then she does a lunch break, and then she does afternoon. Well, my court guy cannot, he can go to lunch, but he can't get involved in something else because then he can't, what happens if he doesn't make it back for court? So there's a lot of underlying issues that people don't know about as far as how the constable's offices really work. We have to have somebody available for the judge all the time. And really by law, there has to be a constable available whether court is in session or not for any issue that might happen in the court area. So there's a lot of issues coming up. I know in Precinct 7, the population has grown tremendously over the last at least 5 years. We have all new areas around Trans Mountain, around Borderland. Well, that whole Borderland area now that used to be green is now full of houses. Trans Mountain is hundreds of houses. Canutillo has grown tremendously. So I think the census is going to surprise us with the sizes of many of these precincts. But I'd like to bring your attention to everything that the constable's offices do. Constable Bernal is correct that many precincts have a high volume of warrants, while some of them do not. So, but they have more civil than some of the other courts do. And I've been in my office 11 years. I've seen swings. For a couple years, my civils will be way up, and then for some reason they come down, and then they go back up. So it's hard to do actual predictions, correct predictions, because you never know just how things are going to go. I know Precinct 1 gets an enormous number of calls for community events that they would love to see the constables out there. And they work very diligently on that. So there's different things. My precinct does, we do the water issues, irrigation issues in the summer. So there's a lot of things that we all do differently because our constituents call upon us. So I'd like all of that to be considered in this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Melissa, having constables say that, you did take into consideration all those things as you looked at.
We did, which is one of the comments that in the earlier projections when we were showing distribution of time spent on tasks, precincts do different things. What Constable 7 takes on in addition to those required powers or duties that are authorized by the statute, you see they fall towards the bottom. They're not a large portion. And that was one of the things that when we were analyzing the data, we wanted to make sure that they're not circumventing where they should be performing the core functions of their jobs. And you can clearly see by the distribution of the tasks, that's not what they're spending the majority of their time. Even though constituents may be calling and asking them to handle tasks that are separate and apart, you can see based on the data, that's not where they're spending, not even the majority, but a significant portion of their time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Do y'all have any other questions?
Commissioner Pettis.
Well, I mean, it's very enlightening. I mean, it's you know, I know we're here to discuss the administrative assistant position, but it's also, I think there's a lot of other issues that this study has brought to light, and which is a good thing, because I mean, it's ultimately, you don't want it, you know, you want to maximize the use of all of these studies that we use. But I think that, you know, perhaps this is something for the Justice Council to look into, the newly formed Justice Council, where we're trying to have better coordination on these things. You know, I mean, just looking at the data, I mean, my question would be, I mean, you know, if the constable in the JP6 area doesn't have enough time to execute warrants, I mean, who's executing those warrants? Is there just a bigger backlog, or are we expecting the sheriff's department to do it? Or you know, I mean, I don't know if there is standardization. I mean, perhaps the constables could speak to that. And there needs to be some standardization in the enforcement side of things. I mean, is the expectation that all the constable precincts are going to execute warrants from, you know, the district and county criminal courts? Or is that something that's better left for the sheriff's department, so that way there's perhaps a more evenly distributed effort to go after warrants? But we shouldn't. My concern is that I don't want. Hopefully, we don't see a disparity of warrants being executed in certain zip codes and not being executed in other zip codes. I mean, to me, that seems like a major public safety issue. If that's the case, again, it speaks to just the antiquated nature of the maps, the way that we look at the population that we're serving and how are we serving them. But there needs to be some standardization across the board about how these things are executed and who's responsible for executing them, whether it be the constable's office or the sheriff's department.
Well, the constables are responsible for all precepts from the JP's office.
Yes, no, I understand from the JP's office, but if they're also taking on additional duties of the, you know, or not additional duties, but if some of are going and taking on the district courts or criminal courts that are within their zip codes, within their precincts, I mean, that raises concern, because does that mean that certain zip codes certain constables are doing that, whereas others aren't? In the sheriff's department, is it necessarily executing those warrants in those areas where the constables aren't? I mean, if Constable Garcia has to spend most of his time in court due to all the traffic, due to all just the sheer volume of cases, I mean, who's executing the warrants in that precinct if he doesn't have the capacity to do so? It's something that we just need to as we continue to look at these issues, those are things that we need to look at.
Commissioner, when Oscar says that he looks at that precinct, let's say precinct, at one zip code, he's not saying that he's only working that zip code. What it is that, for example, today, let's go and do this zip code, so they're not driving around all over town. That's the only reason. The only reason is that, okay, let's concentrate on the zip code to see where those warrants are in the zip code. That way we're not driving, we're not looking at all the warrants and then hitting the west side, driving all the way to the east side and driving all over town. So when he says, I'm going to look at warrants in let's say 2-5, well, that's because that way they can concentrate in that zip code, not because of they want to target that zip code. It's just that it's easier to concentrate and stay within that zip code
it's more efficient, right? Because
exactly,
it's
efficiency.
more efficient because, you know, if you have a constable that's covering a certain area, then you'd probably want that constable to serve the warrants in that certain area, right? I mean, that's logical, but I can understand what Commissioner Perez is saying. So if Constable Garcia is in court all the time, he can't be serving the warrants, and so who is?
And that goes back to what Angie said, is that we need the JPs to put those warrants into the system. And I don't know why they don't do it, but if they were to put those warrants into the system.
So by not putting them in the system, they keep them in their own precinct, is what
Correct.
you're saying? And so, for example, if Constable Garcia's JP is not putting them into the system, that means if they're all in that precinct, then who's coming across into that precinct and serving those warrants, right? I mean, that's, I think.
And that, well, I'm sorry, but that's a very good point. There's a couple of JPs, maybe more, that will hold them for 30 days. What that means is if you have a violator that's wanted for whatever reason, and somebody stops that violator, a DPS trooper, he or she will not know that they're wanted.
And sometimes we'll know that they're wanted because they enter it, but the warrant has to also be scanned. And if it's not scanned, then we can't do anything about it. So Commissioner Leon was correct, is that, for example, there's a violator that runs a red light and is given a ticket in Horizon. He could live on the west side. So when Oscar says, okay, I'm gonna do this zip code, that warrant on the west side is gonna come out, even though the ticket was given in Horizon. So that's where he's just concentrating on that zip code, even though the warrant was given over there. But if it's not scanned, then he can't do anything about it.
And I had another question, but I just
But again, we're concentrating a lot on the warrants, where a lot of the work is also maybe even 80 or 90% is the civil. And then we once we do what we're statutorily supposed to do, then we go to the warrants.
Constable Ugarte, that 88,000 backlog that you mentioned, is that just JP warrants, or is that system, like everything with
That's
district
all
and
warrants filed
warrants?
with the sheriff's office. That's felony,
So-
misdemeanor, class C, everything.
And so what's the backlog with just JP warrants? Do we know that? I mean, because it seems to me that as JPs, we should concentrate on the JP warrants first, and then if we have extra time, we go to the other ones, right?
Well, in most cases, sometimes when you go to a house and there's people that have warrants, it's not like a decent family, so you go knock on somebody and then there's somebody else that has a warrant, or there's a misdemeanor that's tied up to a felony. So when you're there, you execute both of them.
No, sure. I mean, I understand. Like, if it's like if you have that type of coincidence where somebody who's in the same household has a JP warrant and another type of court warrant, I mean, I understand that. But I'm just curious. I mean, are we putting more resources into serving the district court and the county court warrants, or are we putting more resources into
The way I see it
concentrating on the
is
JP warrants?
a warrant is a warrant. If somebody's wanted, I'm gonna execute that warrant. I don't see, okay, this is a JP warrant and this is a felony warrant. If we're out there and if we run into somebody that has an open warrant, I'm gonna bring them to justice and book them. That's how I see
Yeah,
it.
well, what's discouraging is, sort of the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing kind of situation, where you've got, they have a concern that they're not putting it in the system, but yet they don't have the ability to address that. And so someone has to come in and back to Commissioner Perez and standardize the whole thing. I mean, we just can't have you having an issue that it's not in the system, but yet you don't have a process to identify.
And I think that's across the board, that issue, because throughout the radio, the constables and the sheriff's office, we share the same radio frequency. And the sheriff's office will also be out there and they run people and there's warrants, but it's not scanned and it cannot be executed. I'm not sure where, the process there, that how come they're not being scanned, or the district clerk's office, the county clerks,
Yeah, I think
JPs. I'm not really sure.
I think that's one of the areas where we do judicial metrics with the district courts and county courts, and we've been looking at the JPs for a while now, and also talking about setting up metrics to measure them by, and that could be one of those metrics is how many warrants are you actually putting in? How many warrants are you creating, and how many are actually going into the system so that our constables can?
When it's during the day, like working hours, and we do run across that problem, we can actually contact the JP and let them know, hey, we have this subject detained. He has a warrant out of your JP, and we can actually take him down to that JP, or the clerk will say, you know what, let me scan that warrant, and it's available in the system. Once it's scanned on the system, then the warrants office here at the sheriff's office, they can actually print it out for us and we can execute it. But that's only during working hours. When it's after 5 or on the weekends, when the staff is not there, then we just have to release that individual.
And I realize we're sort of getting out of the scope
Yes.
of what we're here to do, but I do think somehow, some way, we have to have more of a comprehensive.
Yeah, and as far as for the staffing that we need on the administrative assistant, you know, I've been with the constable's office since 2011. I started as a deputy constable, and when I was working on the field, I would see the need that we were shorthanded and the amount of time that we'd have to go in there and spend on our computers inputting data, and I would see the need for extra staff. Now that I'm the constable, the last 4 years, every time for budget, I do request a position, and every time it gets denied. You know, I've been a team player with Commissioners Court and with Human Resources. They get denied. Let's try next year, okay? Even 1 year, they said, you know what? Let's hold the line. Please don't apply for any positions. You know, we were team players. We didn't apply for any positions that year. This year again, you know, we applied. They got denied. Commissioners Court set aside $250,000 for this study. We wanted to do that with an outside contractor to come and evaluate our tasks, but that fell through. And the constable's office with Human Resources and Commissioner Leon, we got together and we did our internal study. And this study does show that the data that throughout the past years that we have been submitting, and it shows that we're shorthanded. You know, all this data does show that we've been correct all these years. So today I'm here pleading with Commissioners Court to please take action on this item and give us the proper staffing so we can provide better services to the community.
Thank you. Commissioner Leon?
Chief.
I can wait.
What's the bottom line? The bottom line is, you did a study, determined that the administrative assistant would relieve the constable of time done administratively where he or she could be out in the field doing his or her duty. Is that the bottom line?
That is correct, sir. And this is just the first step. Actually, our data shows that each precinct is about 3 bodies short. And obviously, we understand that staffing the constables in one fiscal year with 3 bodies, it's difficult on the court. So that's why we only approach it one step at a time. What can benefit the constable's office more right now? And that would be the administrative assistant, because that would put the boots on the ground, like Constable Summers said. So as a first step, you know, this fiscal year, we want to see if we can get that administrative assistant.
Okay, the bottom line as far as from a fiscal standpoint, is what did we say the cost was going to be? Excuse me.
$260,832.
And the other part of the bottom line is that we say that this is going to be a study period of 2 years?
Yes, sir. So with any position, we will monitor whether that new position did in fact do what it intended to do for a 2-year period. So we will definitely stay.
Reevaluate after 2 years?
We evaluate every quarter for 2
Every
years.
quarter for 2 years, okay.
Yes, sir. And if anything obviously changes, we would work with the constables directly, and then we would definitely inform the court. And we have done that in the past.
Okay, and why did you say what?
So we put $250,000 in the budget, so this is for this fiscal year, certainly the appropriation level that is set is adequate because we're into a third of the fiscal year. There would be a fiscal impact going into 2021 of about $11,000.
11,000?
Oh, I mean, ultimately
11,000 more.
Yeah, 11,000 above the current budget. The hopes and goals are that if these administrative staff can clear up the day-to-day paperwork type of activity and allow the officers to serve more papers and execute more warrants.
So at this point in time, you're saying we can't do it?
For this fiscal year, yes. And there'll be a small fiscal impact at this recommended level for fiscal year 21 of about $11,000 from an appropriation standpoint. If that were to go into place, the big thing to analyze on a regular basis is what's the return on that investment
Assuming-
leading into 2020.
This
And
was a
that's just-
one-time expenditure though, right, on a study, and then we're taking the money that we didn't spend on the study and
No,
spending it
sir,
on
so the way the money was set aside, excuse me, Wally. So the $250,000 was set aside for staffing cost. We actually had separate funding for a study.
For the study, okay.
50,000 set aside.
So the 250 was for staffing cost. And that assumes that when we do the evaluation 10 months or so, 9 months from now, that all of them are showing performance and that we recommend that all of them continue.
Okay, couple points. One is that the constable's office is one office. The JP is separate. Now, what I'm saying, from my standpoint, is that we have no control over the JP directly. Maybe indirectly we do, but not directly. So we cannot dictate to the JP what and when he put those warrants in the system. Now, I would like to think that we would have communication between the JP and the constable, you know, that, hey, we need to be working this together, we're supposed to be on the same team, and not you do your thing and I do my thing, you know, but we commission a study, you conduct a study, you're here to make a recommendation. So what say you?
Yes, sir. Our recommendation stands that we ask the court to authorize 5 new administrative specialist intermediate G16 positions and regrade one of our administrative specialist intermediates to a senior position to serve in a lead capacity to ensure consistency for a total impact, full year impact of $268.32.
And from a budget standpoint, we're okay.
For fiscal year 20, yes, sir, there would be a small impact for 2021.
I'm moving absolutely.
Do we have a breakdown of I mean, I'm still very curious about the amount of JP warrants that are being served as opposed to district court and county court warrants. Was that included? Do we have a breakdown of that?
We don't have that
You
at this
treat them
time.
equally is what I'm understanding, right? You
Sorry?
treat them equally. I mean, it doesn't matter where they come from or where they're generated.
I think the constables may be able to speak better to that, but when we're looking at warrants and the way they report warrants to us, it's all warrants, attempted warrants executed. I don't know if they carve out which are JP or county or district court.
Well, Constable, you're not going out looking for other warrants to issue. If it occurred in your area that you're responsible for, you're executing those warrants.
That is correct. We try to focus, of course, the JP, they give us a list. Hey, constable, this is a new list, the warrants that came out. Then I separate the warrants by zip code, just to try to be efficient. I don't want my deputy driving all across town, because when you get a warrants list, they're all over El Paso County. So I try to distribute it by zip codes. Then I run a lister, because if I have a deputy in a certain area, and just because the warrant is not on this list, it might be on the Odyssey list. You know, so if he's in the area, I want him working all that area so he can stop by stop.
In the area, you mean?
In a zip
your
code.
precinct.
No, it doesn't matter, because even though the warrant comes out of my JP, the warrant might be in San Elizario. He got stopped in JP1, but he resides in San Elizario. So then the warrant is active in that area. So we have to drive to that area and execute that warrant.
What I'm asking you is, each day, you're not just sitting there looking to say, well, what warrants can we go find? I think what I heard was that when you stop someone and you got a JP warrant, but then at the same time, there may be another warrant that's outstanding, you execute both of them.
That's correct.
But you're not just, okay, well, we don't have a JP warrant, so let me go see if I can find any other warrants that are issued by the county court or another court, one of the district courts.
Okay. Yeah, and the past few years, we haven't even had that opportunity because we're understaffed, and we try to prioritize on our civil because that's all time sensitive. So that's why there's that backlog in warrants. When we have extra time, then we actually run these lists. But as far as my precinct, the last couple of months, we haven't been working warrants because we're just focusing on our civil because that's time sensitive.
So fundamentally, your primary core function is that you're doing your civil matters and then your JP warrants.
Yes, and the reason I have
if there's another warrant, a service bailiff, and if there is another warrant that's out there in the execution of the stop that you made on this case, this individual got another one issued by someone else, you execute both.
That is correct, sir.
But you're not out there just looking, well, let me go sit on the find some warrants issued by someone else.
No, sir.
Okay.
Commissioner Leo?
I'm in agreement with Constable Ugarte. They have been team players. I've visited with all the constables and I visited their precincts, most of them, and I have to agree with what has been said. Now, we set aside, this court set aside $250,000, and if I'm correct, the $50,000 that was allocated for the study was not spent. So I'm gonna make a motion that we reallocate $11,000 of that study to go into the 2021 budget. I don't know if I can do that for that budget to absorb that that overage or the underage that were there. So my recommendation, my motion will be to go ahead and hire these administrative assistants, and knowing that we're going to have the quarterly reports, and we've done it before. If they're not performing or the statistics don't bear up to what we're talking about, then they are removed. But my motion is, Erica, if I've stated it correctly, would that work?
Well, yeah, let me just, I think I have.
So the motion, what I heard you say is you move to authorize the positions. Will we work on the backside, the semantics of the funding?
Okay.
So, and I think your motion, Commissioner, we needed to be authorize 5 new administrative assistant intermediates for the 5 constable offices that do not currently have one, and authorize the reclassification of the existing administrative assistant intermediate position to administrative assistant senior in Constable Precinct 3.
My motion is as described.
I had already made that motion, but I second it.
Yes, one more question here, Commissioner.
Sorry. So is there, so there's not a system in place right now for, I mean, I understand that a JP may issue a warrant in their precinct, and the person that you're serving is all the way across the county. There's not a process in place or a system in place to where the constable that lives or that covers that precinct can prioritize serving that warrant instead of the constable who works in the precinct of the JP.
That's why they need to scan them into the system. That way the constable over there can see it and execute it.
If he doesn't, then you're the one that's responsible until it's scanned, then he knows that the other precinct is responsible.
Right.
And Commissioner, that's a very good question. As you all are discussing, I'm making several notes that obviously aren't part of this discussion, but we bring up good points that need to be addressed, that should not fall by the wayside, and we need to see what we can do to either meet with the JPs, convene some kind of best practices, encourage, recommend. We understand we cannot mandate certain things, but working with them to understand those efficiencies to see if we can help further this project. I don't see why.
It wasn't only that.
I'll ask
There's
Joel to work on.
Point of order.
There's several.
Point of order, we have a motion
Several
second.
things, yes, sir.
Commissioner Pettis?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and vote yes, but just having just a equalization across all precincts, I think just needs to really be examined during the quarterly reports. Again, because we have a situation where there are some precincts that are serving a much smaller population than others, and the solution that we're approving today is sort of just an equal across the board. One precinct gets one, and but in the absence of an alternative, so I'll vote yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Commissioner Leon?
Aye.
Commissioner Stout?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Judge Samaniego?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Judge, Commissioners, before we go to the next item, we have a request. I'm not sure if they're still here, but we have a request to open up public comment so that the Bel Air students who have done the artwork out in your lobby are here changing out the artwork. And I believe this may be one of the last times that they're doing the artwork for you. So we thought you might want an opportunity to thank them. They left already? Okay, cancel that, you're not gonna thank them in person.
Can we send a letter to them or something signed by us?
We can have
or
them come
just-
during one next year, just to.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Any other things?
Nope, that was just a request.
Thank you.
Item number 6, receive a presentation on the judicial management report.
And the keyboard. I just want the keyboard, I don't need the clicker.
Thank you.
I'll get with you in a second.
Periodically, Judge, Commissioners, we give an update on where we are on the judicial measures and how those are going. So if you'll bear with me just 1 second.
Betsy, do we ask anybody to participate from their side? Or?
Yes, sir, I did. I thought that Judge Chu or Judge Morales was going to be here. So they may be on their way down. If you'll just give me a few minutes to bring it up. And also, I thought Jacob was going to stay for this item because we are in the process of, so you may know or recall that this project actually started in 2014. And I worked closely with the judiciary, the clerks, ITD, several different offices to get this started. All of us went through and we became certified court tools. We became certified in the court tools measures. Just really dived into this. In IT department, I can't even say enough about how vital they were to getting this going. But we started originally with 3 measures at the request, I believe, of Commissioner Pettis. Then we started looking at what other measures were available. This is probably the most extensive performance measures we currently have in the county. So these judicial measures that we're going to go over are truly a measure of the entire judicial system, not just of courts. Some of the things that you all were talking about, like outstanding warrants, sometimes these metrics tell us those stories. And they tell us other stories about things going on in our metric system. Everything from the clerks and their files to the courthouse and facilities and how accessible we are. So this is really an overall performance metric system about our overall system. So since we've brought on Jacob and Jose, who are our data gurus, we've also started talking about transitioning these measures over to them to help maintain and update and make them even more user-friendly, if you will. And there's different types of systems we could use to track and show the data in a more meaningful way. So we're in the process of evaluating that. We're also in the process of looking at how can we eventually expand these measures to even include JP performance. This has been a major undertaking and will continue to be, but it is continuing to be worked on and we're making progress. So today I just wanted to show you some information. The report is accessed by going to our judicial tab and going down to this area on the menu here. And when you do that, it brings up this judicial management page.
Listen, let me stop you. I did ask a question. We have the Council of Judges. Now, as far as the JPs, is there a council, do they fall under the Council of Judges?
They don't. They actually have their own justice council. And they have, but now I will tell you, last year we started working with Judge Trejo when she was the administrative judge to start folding JPs in under the Council of Judges as much as possible. And they have started and continue to do that. So on various measures, they're now coordinating more together. But we do have a separate justice council. Justice of the Peace Council. I'm sorry?
Who heads that up?
I believe right now it's Judge Lujan and Judge Herrera.
And then meet?
Herrera.
They meet on a regular basis?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So here's where you access the measures. And you can see these first 8 measures are actually 8 measures that are covered under the Court Tools program. These last 3 measures are additional 3 measures that the county wants to measure. I'm gonna just click on a few and show you some of the information that's available. Access and fairness. This is actually an annual survey that we conduct. I like going to the whole PDF for the full report. So every year, generally in May, we conduct a survey. The strike team actually does this. You'll see them when you're coming in the courthouse, both on the 3rd floor and the 1st floor, and they survey citizens who are here or visitors to the courthouse who are here for various reasons, and they analyze and ask questions. This is based on the Court Tools model, these specific questions. We've added one additional question to the Court Tools model, which was the ability to find parking to access the courthouse in a timely manner. And so you'll see this shows 2017 and 2018. Today, the 2019 report is actually being presented to the Council of Judges, and then we will be adding it to the online reporting. So this tells how many people rated that the finding the courthouse was easy. The dark line was 2017, the blue line is 2018, and then shortly we'll be adding another line for 2019. And then, so that's access. All these questions are about access. Things like easily found the courtroom and office needed. And we can track, for example, we changed our wayfinding signs in the courthouse. So we can see that there's a slight increase in how easy it was to find the courtroom or the office needed. Feedback on website, our hours, and then here's the feedback on parking. Here, one of the things I was gonna say, I thought was interesting, a couple things I thought was interesting was finding the courthouse was easy. Well, in one year, we were having a lot of construction on the roads downtown. And so I know we were hearing a lot of complaints about accessing downtown. So that could be a portion of the reason that we've seen an increase here, but we don't know. And feeling safe in the courthouse. In 2018, we saw an increase there. It'll be interesting to see what the survey from May of this year showed, and then May of 2020. And then this is how the respondents felt about fairness. The cases being handled was fair. We actually see a decline in the 2018. We'll get the 2019 report soon. And then the judge listening, the judge had information necessary. I was treated the same as everyone else. And as I leave the court, I know what to do next about my case. So that's access and fairness. Under court tools, that's actually considered measure 2. Bear with me just a second. Access and fairness is actually measure 1. Apologies. So access, or measure number 2 is clearance rate. What this tells us how many, versus the number of cases coming in, how many cases are being closed. So obviously to avoid backlogs, if 100 cases come into a court this quarter, you'd like to see 100 cases being closed. Otherwise, you have a backlog developing. So again, I like going to the full report because it tells the better story. And I'm gonna go down to the actual page that tells clearance rates. This shows incoming, this is all the data. This is incoming, this is outgoing dispositions via a disposition. And you get down here to what the actual data is, and that's the clearance rate. So like here you'll see Jesus Herrera, 184% clearance rate. Part of that may have been because I know we were doing a cleanup. So there were some old cases and some cases that other judges may have been helping to close. And I don't know if that's particular to this one, but that's sometimes what happens. So every time someone's above 100%, they're closing more cases than what came in. So, and these are again broke down by quarter. So these are the county court here, then you'll see it go to district courts. And when you see under 100%, that means there's a backlog growing in that quarter. The line that goes across the measure is what the average is amongst those courts. It's but really the goal is to see at least 100%. Misdemeanors here, felonies for the second quarter. We go down to third quarter. All this information is through June. We're updating right now for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2019. And then you can see how we compared first quarter of 18 to 19. We definitely see an increase. Second quarter, we see an increase in clearance rates. Third quarter, there's an increase. Now, this is still fourth quarter from the year before. So we don't have 18 to 19 yet. That's the one that we're working on now. And that's for misdemeanors. And then here is for felonies. You can see there was an increase in the first quarter, just about even in the second quarter, third quarter even, compared to the year before. And then we're still waiting for the fourth quarter. And then it goes into breaking it down by judge. So you can see how, for example, Judge Moody, this was the last 4 quarters. This was the last quarter of 2018 where he was, first quarter of 2019, second quarter of 2019, and third quarter of 2019. The lines on here are the average amongst all the courts. What you really want to see though is at least 100%. And it goes through and it breaks it down by every single judge. You can see the data. When you see these spikes, that's generally some kind of case cleanup, file cleanup. So that's clearance rates. Next, we have time to disposition. What this particular measure tells us is there's normally a standard for how long a case should take to be closed. So, for example, let's see if it tells us in here. No, it'll be over here. Felonies, you should have 75% of felonies closed within 90 days. This is according to National Center for State Court Standards. 90% of all felonies should be closed within 180 days. And then 98% should be closed within 365 days. We're gonna go to the actual report to see how we were doing. So again, going down here to the National Center for State Courts Processing Standards, the goal is to have 75% of felonies closed within 90 days. We are averaging about 33%. You want 90% closed within 180 days according to the standard. We're at 56%. And then you want 98% within 365 days. Here we're getting closer, we're at 84%. On misdemeanors, you want 75% within 60 days, 90% within 90 days, and 98% within 180 days. And you can see our measures here. We're at 16%, 24%, and 51%. So we're lagging behind pretty significantly in the closing of felonies. And you can also see the breakdown by judges again. So here's an example for third quarter, and poor Judge Moody, I pick on him because he's always the first judge to pop up in our process. I believe it's because maybe he has the lowest court number. But you'll see that here, the gray is the National Center for State Court Standard, and then here's his actual performance. So in the first 90 days, you want 75% closed, he's at 37. Then within 180, 90%, we're at 60. And then in 365 days within a year, you want it 98%, and he's at 87. And we can kind of go through here and see Judge Salas Mendoza's getting up there above 90. Judge Lizarraga, 73. Judge Dominguez is very close at 96%. Judge Alyssa Perez, who came into office last year, she's staying at 98%. Judge Selena Solis, also a new judge, is at 97%. Judge Medrano's up there above 90. And now we're going into the misdemeanors. And where they're at. Misdemeanors, we want those done within 6 months. According to the the standard is 6 months. And we see Judge Chando's close to 80. And then you can also see the total number of disposed cases up here in that corner. So that's measure 3. The next measure is the age of the active cases pending. So we look at what percentage of the cases from the day they were filed to the time we took the measurement, what percentage of cases are over a year old? And again, here's just kind of a snapshot of all the courts together. So you'll see gray means they have both civil and criminal cases. Blue is just criminal. But you'll see that, for example, in here, 25% of their cases, active cases, are over a year old on misdemeanors there. But the average is 16.6% is over a year old. We'd like that to be significantly lower, according to standards. And then felony cases over a year old, we're averaging about 26% over a year old. And then you can see the breakdown. This again was just first quarter at the time we took the measurement. And we can kind of watch how that changes from time to time. So for example, here Judge Speasney was at 23% in the first quarter. And then by the second quarter, he was at 28%. And by the third quarter, he was no longer there. Judge Speasney retired. Trial date certainty, this is a new one that we have started tracking. And this one is measure 5. And it tells us the number of times cases disposed by trial were rescheduled for trial. So how certain are we that the trial is going to happen on the date that it was originally scheduled to happen? So of course we show the difference between bench trials and jury trials. So first quarter, and then we go second quarter and third quarter of 2019. So in civil cases, 100% of bench trials happened on the time that they were scheduled to happen. Jury trials, it was 80% for civil. Felonies, 100% for the bench trials, 17% for jury trials. So that tells us that on felony cases, those trials are often being reset. And then misdemeanors, 0% on bench trials. I think that is probably because I don't think there were any. And then jury trials, 43% of the time they happened as scheduled.
Can we have data saying what are some of the variables behind rescheduling?
We do, no. We don't report like the reason for rescheduling. The data looks for codes that mean rescheduling, but I don't think it totals what the reasons were for rescheduling.
Because we could have, there might be some underlying cause.
I believe it's normally a request of defense to reschedule. They request a continuance.
But it's not preparation from the judges.
But the judge doesn't have to, it's still a reflection on the judge's way of managing his court, his or her court. Because you don't have to continue to grant continuances. You can, and we do have certain judges who are more stern, and attorneys know who are more stern, and you have some who are more lax. And of course, obviously, the longer, especially if it's a major felony, and someone's in jail, the longer the case gets continued, a person may possibly be detained, which is an impact to taxpayers. Reliability and integrity of case files, measure 6. This is the percentage of files that can be retrieved, and it generally now is all electronic. When court tools were developed, a lot of it still thought of paper files. And then how much those files are accurate and complete. So we do an audit, the strike team does an audit on our files every year. We're actually getting the 2018 measures, we have them, we don't have them updated, and 2019. So this is making sure that the cases are available and reliable, and we break it down by types of courts. So here's the probate courts. In 2016, the reliability and integrity, and again, this is just making sure the record's accessible and it's accurate. So in the audit in 2017, we had 100% compliance for probate courts, that the files were complete. And then here we go through county criminal, looking for what information we're expecting to find in the file and whether or not it was able to be found. For various types of files. And we pull, I believe it's 50 files per type of case to just spot check for this information.
Betsy, this information is available to the public.
Yes, sir.
At what point is it presented to council of judges or?
Generally, they get and see this, they can see this anytime they want. I don't know that we've done another presentation to them on it.
I would like it to be more interactive.
I need to double check with Michael to see if they have received the full presentation of the report.
I would like it more a bit interactive as we go through this, that there's discussions as to some of the things that we might not be seeing, because, you know, a lot of the judges will stop me or come by my office and talk about the differences between the courts, and that we do a lot of apples to oranges kind of things, and so just so that they feel more comfortable.
And Michael Cuccaro mentioned this in his update to you all, that they're diving more into the metrics. So I believe they are presenting them, but I don't know. We work closely, all of this data, we work very closely with the Council of Judges strike team on. So that's normal, like interactions on our level, but I don't know how often they're presenting this information to the judiciary.
And as I said before, we need to take advantage of the great relationship we're having. You know, they're coming to my office and having discussions where we have an open communication on certain things, so.
Yes, sir.
This could be scheduled to do it more of a little bit of a workshop kind of thing.
Yes, sir. This is a measure that was updated by Court Tools, and we were just now at the point that we're getting all this implemented. This is measure 7. This is ensuring fairness in legal financial obligations. This was changed in light of what's going on at the national level about judicial reform and people being able to pay. And that we shouldn't just look at you are fine, did you pay, but we also looked at, do you have the means to pay? So one of the first elements is rating by defendant respondents of their treatment by the court in which the court has imposed a legal financial obligation. And so was it a fair obligation, or the fairness of it? And so you can see here kind of the county courts, the ratings. You can download the full report and dive into it further. But this is a newer, updated measure. And it shows the overall fairness index score on the scale of 0 to 100. You can see that generally some places are thinking, these are county courts, and then these are county criminal courts here. And then the district courts. And then we have added, you'll see we are adding, here's where we've started trying to add, here's JPs. And then again, we go quarter two. And this is actually being compiled by our financial recovery team, data from them.
Including the JPs, this is recent.
Yes, sir.
Excellent.
We don't have them here for some reason. I'll have to find out. We have them for quarter two, but not quarter three. We repeated county courts instead of adding. This is probably, no, we repeated county courts. And so it should have been JPs. We'll correct that. And now this particular measure has three parts. This was the first part. And then the percentage of cases in which legal financial obligations are met. This tells us how many people are actually paying, what percentage of the cases are they actually meeting their fines, paying their fines in full. So here's by justice of the peace, first quarter, county courts, district court criminal, district court civil. Again, second quarter and third quarter. A lot of times we're making payment arrangements. And then also ratings by, the third part of this measure is ratings by judicial officers, court administrators, and court staff on the importance of practices used by the court to determine, monitor, and enforce compliance by defendants with legal financial obligations. And so this tells us how important it is and what the rating of the current practice is. So this is assessing ability to pay, establishing payment plans, providing compliance assistance and payment alternatives to satisfy the legal financial obligation, and then the uncollectible, examining enforcement policies and identifying uncollectible debt. So it's almost a rating of our collection practices.
I have a question, Betsy. On these, when you do it by quarter, is the final quarter like a cumulative of all of them, or
No, it's each
just
quarter individually. It's a snapshot in time. And right now, the snapshot we've taken is as quarterly. The next one is effective use of jurors, and this is measure 8. So this is an interesting one, and this is one that part of what we're working on as far as like jury reform. The Council of Judges has got this as one of their priorities to evaluate. So this is the number of citizens selected for jury services who are qualified and available as a percentage of the total number called. So for example, when we call 100 jurors, but we only plan to select, say, 12 and an alternate or two, that's a low juror yield. So what you want to call less and have more jurors qualified to sit. And so when we were doing our training, as a matter of fact, the training that I went through, the gentleman told us that if they have less than a 96% yield, they're like rated very poorly at their courts. We run somewhere between, and we're actually reanalyzing, you'll see where this drops off. We're reanalyzing how we compile this data because we were counting things. We were giving ourselves for credit for things that I don't think were accurate. So we're reevaluating this. We've been diving into it further. This is probably more accurate as to what our juror yield is, and it's upside down. So about 4% of the jurors we call get used. You want about 80% or better, according to the national standards. So this is something that Michael Cucaro is very experienced in and very interested in, and he wants to really work on what we can do to improve that. And we've heard lots of explanations and can completely understand I'm sorry, that's postponed, let me back up. But if at a national level, they're able to get an 80% juror yield rate, we shouldn't be that far off a national. There might be some issues here, like we may have a more or maybe even not a bilingual population, but we may have a higher population that's only foreign speaking. So that might impact our jury yield some. But
not 70%.
exactly, exactly. So that's one that we really are working on, also updating and getting the right data and then seeing what we can do to address that. This is a cost per disposition. So per case closed, what did it cost? So you'll see here, here's misdemeanor. The average cost in Q1 of FY19 is $306. And this is also based on the fees that are generated and the revenue collected. So for example, if a defendant's case is dismissed, there's no fees. But this is the average cost by court and by case for misdemeanor, and then here is for felony. The average was $907 in the first quarter.
Cost to the county, not to the actual
Correct.
defendant, right?
Correct. Here is second quarter misdemeanors was higher at $540. The second quarter was higher on felony, $1282. You can see the third quarter of FY19 there. So the average net cost per disposition misdemeanors, you'll see first quarter we went down, second quarter we went up slightly for misdemeanors, third quarter we went up slightly, and then this is the previous fourth quarter. And then felonies, again, you see our costs are upticking slightly. Per quarter. We're also working on a different one. It's called a net cost per case. That's another measure we're working on, not just per disposition.
Betsy, I guess before, on the jury utilization, I guess to put that in perspective, I guess, right, of how much that impacts the number of jurors that have to be called. I mean, so if the national average is hovering around 80, that means that for every 100 jurors that are called, 80 are used, right?
Yes.
Right.
So that means here, if we're at around 4 to 5%, we would have to call 1,000 people to get 50 or
Well, here's what happens here. We call 100 or we call 50 and we use none often. Case settles. The courts here use it as a tool, a threat, kind of a motivation that like, look, we're gonna go to trial. If you all don't settle today, we're going to trial. I have my jurors. And a lot of times that'll either force a plea or force a settlement.
Is that the court or is that the DA that's making it?
It's my understanding that it's the court. The judges have told me I need to have that jury ready because they won't get it done if I don't have that, like I'm ready to go. I need to show them I'm ready to go to trial if they don't reach an agreement. And so they'll go to the point of calling the jurors. I don't know that that's common across the country. I don't know. I've seen that. I mean, it's happened to me in another state where I was called and I was in the juror room that morning and then the case settled and we didn't have to hear it. Or the defendant pled out. But I don't know how common that is, but I do know that we pull very, very large pools. To me, 100 is a very large pool, to get 12 to 14 people.
And certainly I'm sure that has an impact on the failure jurors of having a higher number of jurors that fail to appear for whatever reason and imposes fines and fees on them.
Mm-hmm. And it also has an impact on operations. I mean, obviously we know that getting in the garage on days when there's a large number of jurors is very difficult. Yeah. It keeps us from being able, I mean, we have a waiting list someone told me the other day that they had been on our waiting list for 4 years from the public. Over 4 years for a person who would like to buy a monthly garage spot where we would have a steady income. But we can't sell the garage space because we have to reserve it for big jury calls.
And getting into the building as well.
Getting into the building is very difficult. People standing out in the weather because they're waiting to get into the building. And it's a demand on staff, you know, like the jury staff. And
What's a huge root cause to this parking thing, and you see they're frustrated, they're running around, it just creates a
not
whole
to
domino effect.
exactly, and not to mention the impacts on individual lives.
Yes.
You know, Commissioner Leon, you've sat here through jury duty on a very long day, you know.
Yeah, the problem is not necessarily the jurors, it's the panels that are basically, you know, when you call hundreds of people and you stand around from 8 a.m. to 6. And one of the questions, there's many reasons. One of them is we fill out a questionnaire, yet both the defense and prosecution know that they are not going to be calling them, but they're still called. So there's a lot of things that need to be addressed. And I'm no expert. I'm just saying that I've been involved in this for a while. And I think we can do better. I know we
Yes,
can
sir.
do better.
Yes, sir. And I will tell you, I had a conversation earlier this week with HOK, who's doing our jail study, and they're going to make some recommendations to us on jury use also. He said, you all aren't using, I thought, boy, this is like 2 steps ahead of where we want to be, which is great. He said, you all aren't using technology for jury selection yet, like video technology. And I said, no, we're not. And he said, well, we're gonna give you all some information on that too. So I think it's gonna be helpful. This report called jail bed days is basically the number of jail bed days consumed. So here you'll see first quarter jail bed days, second quarter and third quarter jail bed days. So by judge, how many jail bed days based on all the cases underneath them did they consume? And again, by court, this is misdemeanors, how many jail bed days they were consuming, and then by felonies, how many jail bed days did they consume on average? And we're always working on trying to get this down, again, because this is pre-trial. So this is part of our ongoing efforts to reduce the amount of individuals, or actually, let me clarify, to ensure that the individuals being held are those that are a significant risk. Sorry. And this again shows us by quarter what we're looking at compared to the previous year. Disposition rates is the number of cases disposed as a percentage of the active caseload. So how many cases are open? What percentage of those did you close each quarter? So again, this is the input data here, and then the actual disposition rates are down here. Okay, so here's the disposition rates. So out of all the cases you have open, even if you had a 100% clearance rate, this also ties back into the age of the caseload and the clearance rates, because they could have had a 100% clearance rate, but the disposition rate of their total cases is low because they have a backlog, if that makes sense. So this shows you what the disposition rate was for misdemeanors, for felonies for the first quarter, and then the average amongst all of our courts. Where it says, it's kind of funny, I was noticing this in the data, it's kind of funny where it says A Pettis, that's Alyssa Pettis, and where it just says Pettis, that's Anna Pettis.
Who put this together for us?
So ITD does a lot of the data management and pooling of the data. And then some of the data is provided more manually, like for example by the jury group or by financial recovery. And then Wally's office, a lot of this requires manual calculation and then compilation. And Wally's office does a lot of that. So it's a joint effort putting this report together. It's a very, and then the strike team also helps by analyzing to look for any oddities. The strike team is part of the council of judges, and but if there's anything that looks out of place, to help us go in there and say, okay, what's happening? What's going on with the data? Why is it out? Why do we see an anomaly here? And it helps us identify either oddities or errors or what things that we may need to work on and address.
Were you involved in this, Jacob?
Not yet, but he's about to be heavily involved.
Jacob Miles with County Administration. No, I've not been involved with this aspect whatsoever, but I have been doing some internal visualizations of the data. And what that enables us to do is see some of the inaccuracies very clearly. So if there's conversion errors or if there's clerical data entry errors, those are much easier to see with the visualizations that we've incorporated internally, but those are not ready for public consumption because there are so many errors and the public could misconstrue some of the data and misinterpret it. So for sure, this is, I think, the best way to present this data at this particular time until we get all the data inaccuracies kind of cleared out and we can provide some context as to why certain judges may have certain different metric results than other judges, because exactly what Judge Samaniego said, no court is the same as every other court, just like the constables. And so there needs to be some context as to why certain courts have different measures and different outcomes than other courts.
Okay, I asked that because, and I should have said that at the beginning, a great asset in putting all these numbers together, not only with the constables, a court issue that you helped me with some time back, and you've done a great job, and I'm glad you're involved in this because just like you all have said, there's vast differences between one court to the other.
And we're glad he's involved to the future evolution of this, because to the extent that we could know that we have clean data come in and have automated procedures that will allow us to do this much more in a much more expedited fashion and make it more timely to present, the more valuable that's going to be as well.
No, and you address the anomalies, they come out, but then you go and find out why that's happening, and you find out the other variables, and then you're okay. But if you go and there is no reason to have differences, then you can address it.
And some of these like anomalies or even like issues, things that we hear about through the data, that new Justice Leadership Council is going to be a really valuable tool to start saying, because we can identify something, but if the group isn't going to work on it and address it, we're not getting anywhere. And so that Justice Leadership Council is going to be very helpful to
We
this.
saw it this morning, there's a disconnect. There's issues that go to the other side of the formula that need to be addressed that they can't address. So getting
Right.
that together is
Yes,
really
sir.
valuable.
So is there any other questions on that item? Okay, we just wanted to give you all that update. So
Very good.
Just want to say something. And I think this is one of those areas where we talked about, I think El Paso County leading the nation. I know of no other jurisdiction in the country that has this robust of metrics to analyze, our courts and our criminal justice system as a whole, and it helps us just to make better decisions, helps us to identify problems that perhaps we weren't aware of previously. But it's El Paso County, I think, has done a tremendous job, and it took several years. I mean, to get to this point, there were a lot of data issues that had to be cleaned up before we felt comfortable for public consumption. But it's certainly been a positive thing, both for, I think the judiciary has taken this seriously and has looked at this data very often, but also it's just in terms of transparency, it provides the public with an important tool so they can see how their tax dollars are being spent and look at the effectiveness of court, efficiency of courts, things like that.
Thank you. Jacob.
Thank you,
Great job. I'm really excited for the next evolution of this because The program that Jacob uses to visualize data, similar to what we saw somewhat in the earlier presentation, it's really, it's meaningful and it makes data even more user-friendly, so. Okay, thank you.
Item number 7A for executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.072. Discuss the potential acquisition of property within the Texas and Pacific Company Railroad Survey Section 3. Okay, for this item, I'd like a motion to delete.
So move. Second.
Commissioner Perez?
Aye.
Commissioner Leon?
Aye.
Commissioner Stout?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson has stepped out. Judge Samaniego?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 8, addendum to the agenda. Receive a presentation by the Budget and Fiscal Policy Department in regards to the El Paso County Long Debt Plan.
Good morning, Judge Commissioners. Wally Hargrove from the Office of Budget and Fiscal Policy. I have the red line version up on the board, and one section, we had presented this to the Commissioners Court several weeks ago for consideration of adoption. We also made a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation during our summer special meetings, and had made some amendments based off of those that we presented to you last month. That item was deleted from the agenda for discussion at a Thursday meeting, being today. And the one item that we had a question was the makeup of the Debt Management Committee. The policy had been amended to just correct the title of the Chief Administrator, and we changed the Budget Officer to Executive Director of Budget and Fiscal Policy, and then included the addition of no more than 2 members of Commissioners Court selected by the Commissioners Court to add to the committee. And so that was the item that was the point of discussion and purpose for placing it back on the agenda today. So I'd like to open it up for general discussion, and we can also talk about the other issue brought up this morning by Commissioner Robinson, was the possibility of adding to the policy the county's consideration for issuing future debt in tranches. This policy does not have a tranche provision in it as a preference. We could place it in as an item that the county would consider issuing it in tranches. I did look out at the GFOA best practices in debt management policies, and there's no reference to tranches in there. They did recognize San Diego County as one of their leading debt management policies. Went out and looked at San Diego counties, and they have no provision for tranche issues but also did chat with our bond counsel and financial advisor. There are very few entities that have long-term debt policies in the first place, so I think it's a great thing that we're trying to reduce our practices and our provisions and our preferences to policy. But typically, I'm finding from our finance team on the outside, our external finance team, that when they do have instances of long-term debt policies, they're not seeing the issuance in tranches being put into there. They feel it's a little bit restrictive as a matter of practice. Short-term debt in tranches are usually a commercial paper program, and then also we have taken into consideration the spending provisions on Attorney General has opinions out there, and you can only, once you do a bond order, there's only a certain amount of time you have for the authorization to issue that. So I don't want to speculate and put something in there today, or I'd like to consult with both our financial advisor and our bond counsel that we're going to put some tranche language in there, and the option to do tranches that we crafted as such to it's not too limiting to us, and it's in accordance with Attorney General recommendations and IRS provisions as well. But I was certainly going to bounce that off. I spoke to them this morning, and it's not a bad idea, but the crafting of the language, we know what we
Or
want
could
to
we
be.
make it simple, like we might be able to put something simple in there, like funding will be drawn down as needed?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
so something that doesn't overly restrict
But
you
there
all,
also,
but
there'll be some length of time provisions in there.
Commissioner Pitts.
Well, I think part of it also goes into the favorable interest rate, and that's, I mean, you don't want to be too limiting where you're gonna
Yes, sir.
put yourself in tranches, but if the interest rate environment is favorable to us to where we are able to acquire fund or borrow funds at a much lower interest rate than what, as the Fed right now is raising, lowered rates. And so right now is a favorable time but it's cyclical, so if they raise rates in the future, we don't want to be caught in a situation. So just as long as the policy is flexible to where it takes, because that's also, beneficial to taxpayers if we're able to get more money at a favorable interest rate, as well as it's just a matter of striking that balance between the two.
So we would craft probably some rather short summary language to that effect so that it's not restrictive, but we can take advantage of the market at the time as well. But going back to the debt management committee makeup, I did look at also San Diego, and San Diego has it as we had originally proposed, and that was county administration, your finance team, your budget team, no membership of that body. And I looked at the cities as well, and the cities also has a smaller debt management committee as well, just to look and see on some other policies that are out there that we're aware of, what's the makeup of that, but open for discussion.
I think that's fine. I'm the one that had suggested that we talk about this a little bit more. I think just as long as there's opportunities for the entire court to provide input, on a regular basis. Again, depending on what's being considered. I know there'll be sometimes maybe where there aren't as many items that are being looked at, but as long as that there's sufficient input, because as we look at future potential debt issuances, that it is pretty significant as we look at the needs of a growing county. And I think all members of the court should at least have that opportunity at some point for input. So, whatever the committee structure is, as long as I think there's maybe it's a special, I don't know if it's a component of our Thursday meetings or perhaps a special meeting in and of itself where it's dedicated to that topic. I just think having input from the whole court is important.
I mean, if it's just gonna be like, it says maybe possibly a meeting at least annually, so at least one time. I mean, how often do you envision this?
Well, actually, we had changed it to
quarterly.
To be quarterly at Commissioner Leon's recommendation. And I think if we timed our report and feedback back to the Commissioner's Court for just for a reporting on that and any proposed future recommendations, that we would present those, as you stated, at a special Thursday meeting, so that we would get that feedback from the Commissioner's Court, because no action recommended by the Debt Management Committee has any validity without the ratification and the approval of the Commissioner's Court in its entirety. So.
If it's a quarterly meeting, I don't know if there's a necessity for a committee. I mean, if it's gonna be done quarterly.
And that this formulation of committee and the recommendation does follow some GFOA best practices guidelines. It's again similar to San Diego County, City of El Paso, just a couple that could be used as samples, and also the sample I got from our bond counsel team when we looked at other agencies that have these. This was a similar formation and process.
Now, the committee, would they be meeting on a more regular basis than the quarterly meetings?
So, well, it would be at least quarterly, but I'll give you an example. Some of the things that we may meet more often when we're receiving, like right now, we have this call out for long-term debt needs. And so once we receive those, we'll meet more often than quarterly.
I guess my question was more, if a committee is put together, would they meet more often than report back to the entire court on a quarterly basis?
No, right now we have it under scope, which is the next paragraph, would be no less than quarterly, but also that would be, we would meet as frequently as needed as well. Like Ms. Keller noted, when we're in a call for projects basis, we certainly would be meeting. In those instances, we typically are to meet every few weeks or monthly when we're considering a recommendation for a call for projects and a consideration for debt issuance. That'll be much more frequent at the committee level to formulate a recommendation for the court.
And other places do not normally have the elected body on theirs?
A couple that I've sampled, no.
It goes back to, I think, so I feel like this is an operational portion, administrative portion. The part that you're talking about, Commissioner Pettis, definitely that is something where the Commissioner's Court should be guiding and giving input and direction. like the committee can't operate in a vacuum by any means. And even like right now, this debt call, what I'm expecting to see when everybody has their debt call in, the majority of it is going to be items that have come from the direction of Commissioner's Court. There may be some additional items that come in, like for example, I know that Norma has mentioned to me that she needs a warehouse, that they need to do something about the warehouse on the far west side. So that may not be something that the court's ever discussed with us, and so I can see those kinds of items in there, but the majority of items in there should be things that you all have discussed, things that you all have already had conversations in, either during strategic planning or just during capital conversations or budget conversations, about our growing community, about where do we have parks, where do we not have parks, in areas that have become densely populated. What have we done about, there's some roads that, we will not be able to address with our annual county roads, with our annual road allocation. So I expect to see some of those in there based on conversations that you all have had. Infrastructure, those are the kinds of debt proposals I'm expecting we'll see. And then all of that will be brought back to you all, and we'll have a separate discussion with you all about other major debt projects that you want to see before we proceed.
I mean, if that's the case, if it's more of an operations thing, then perhaps it's just more prudent to, because I think all members of the court, obviously are equally as interested in ensuring that the future needs of the county are met. Whether that be our downtown facility or other facilities throughout the community. So, I mean, maybe it's just best that, we have staff take this, but then again, take the input from Commissioner's Court and then have that regular process, I think would probably be a better structure, because it's.
I think so too.
Agreed. And I'll make that appropriate change. I'll also, there's a provision that follows this under delegation, where the committee has a primary responsibility for developing those financing recommendations. And I'll change that to be in sync with, report back to the court at the same
at least
time frame, at least quarterly, and more frequent as deemed appropriate. Yeah. Okay, I'll take those two into consideration, and then I'll also get that language suggestion, the shorter and the simpler for bond counsel, the better, and I'll get that provision in there and put that in the next red line that we'll have on your agenda on the month of January for consideration.
It already does say it. About it being delivered as closely as possible to the time the contracts are expected. It does say it a little bit already. Up above here.
Right, under the policy statement.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, proceeds from debt issuances will be delivered as closely as possible to the time the contracts are expected.
And maybe we just
I'll just look to see if
word
there's a little
that.
bit we can beef that up a little bit. Okay, great. Thank you very much for the feedback. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Item number 9 was
Jessica, I'm sorry, before we go, we do now have Judge Chu and Judge Morales here. I think they were here they were trying to get here for when I was going over the judicial management report. So if you want to reopen that, and just in case they want any comments or.
Would y'all like to make any comments?
Commissioners, Judge, I hope we can enforce the better late than never philosophy. I am so sorry that we're late. Betsy told me and Judge Morales, and we were, we'll be there. And this morning I just got distracted. I apologize. It wasn't out of disrespect. I just got distracted. And I think Judge Morales did too. We didn't really need to make any comments. We just wanted to let you know that we're interested, and next time we'll put it on our calendar so we can be sure. Because if it's not on the calendar, I forget. So I apologize. But unless you have any questions for us.
Well, I'd like to make some comments, that some things came out where it's obvious that we need, we had the constables here earlier.
Judge, we need to go back to the item.
Oh,
Can you read it in, Jessica?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Item number 6, receive a presentation on the judicial management report.
Make a motion to
rehear. Second.
Commissioner Bettis?
Aye.
Commissioner Lowe?
Aye.
Commissioner Stout?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson is absent. Judge Samaniego.
Aye.
Motion carries.
No, just wanted to, it sort of reinforce the things that we're doing together and this communication between us. You know, we had the constables earlier talking about some of the things where they don't have sort of access to, you know, they see some issues, but then they don't feel like they're able to change that. For example, not, the JP's not putting the warrants into the system, and they don't get to see them until later. So one of the things that came up was that we're on the right path of this relationship, of having discussions, but more of a comprehensive. It looks like there's some items at different places in the judicial system that maybe the left hand doesn't know that the right hand is doing. But if you would look at that, and I think there's some interesting opportunities to really be more comprehensive in our approach. And like I said, you know, and I said earlier, the fact that we can sit down and communicate, I think that was one of the hardest things was, you know, there's a lot of feedback, but if the judges aren't willing to do it or willing to listen to it, then it doesn't matter all the studies that we can have.
Yeah.
So I think I got a deep appreciation of everything that's right, but also some of the need to look at the whole system from the JPs, the constables, and how it all interacts with each other. So I think that holistic approach is now more of a possibility than ever.
Sure, I agree. And to tell you the truth, I have not incorporated the JPs into our sort of universe. And maybe we need to start doing that. I hadn't thought about that because they typically have a different, you know, they do training, they have a different, so, but when we're talking about the issue of how they're doing warrants, it really ought to be, or anything related that moves up to the courts, we need to all be sort of on the same page.
Yeah, we saw some touch points there that I think are gonna make a lot of sense, how they do things. We're trying to look at the administrative component. This morning we looked at, you know, they need administrative, but I think a lot of the things that came up were whether they're in control of some of the things that they're having to address that becomes an obstacle for them. And the opportunity to be able to express it sort of up the ladder from the warrants to all these other things that are taking place. So I think it was more really positive, but some things came out that I think we need a better touch point.
The one thing that I would add is as far as the metrics, sometimes they need to be explained because they may not make sense or they may seem one way different than what they really are. So if at any point any of you have any questions, I mean, we'd be happy to come down and go over them with you, specific numbers of specific, you know, concerns. I think that might be a good idea too.
We saw
Sometimes you can look at
anomalies through between court, but then they can be explained.
Right.
And that's what works, right? To be able to say, you know, there's some differences, and then you explain them off and say the reason for one court to the other are these items. And if not, then we can address why.
Right, absolutely, and it's things like that that's a perfect example where it might help to hear from us or have a discussion regarding what those numbers really mean.
And you should know that we're working on being able to provide to you metrics that are El Paso County centric. So that, and we're working on that, we're gonna be doing some work study, workload, gathering some workload data where each of the judges puts down what they do, how many hours they spent on this, how was it on the bench, was it, so it will be not, what a lot of we're compared to is nationwide and then statewide, and we're working with OCA to identify those, help us look at our metrics for El Paso County. That is,
One
how
of the
should it
things I
look for El Paso?
recommended to Betsy is that the next time we have this presentation, more like a workshop kind of, that we can express sort of more dialogue between us as we look at the numbers and not just a presentation, but more of a, this is what came out, and then we could sit down and have more of an interactive kind of session.
And with that in mind, I think it'd be a good idea to have, and she's not here today, so she was concerned that she wouldn't be here for this, but Ms. Lechuga, because she sometimes will help me interpret the numbers.
Yes.
Because I'll look at them and I may not understand everything, so she has a good working knowledge of what the numbers mean because her office to a certain extent, is putting together those numbers.
I think we're in a great path.
And anybody else that, I'm not sure if she's the only one, but there may be others that have a better understanding of the numbers that we might
Crystal
want
and
to
Amy,
express.
Crystal and Amy
Crystal.
are the two.
Right.
So Crystal will do the district court work, Amy will do the county court work. And so we'll make sure that they're, yes, that they're involved in these conversations. And we'll also make sure that we include, when we see things like when we start working on, with the criminal law committee, that we include constables, that we include JPs in making sure that we have something consistent. How we pull that all together is can be a logistical nightmare, but I think we can do that. But I'm glad you brought it up because now it's in our brains so that we can, I had not really thought about the JPs.
And when the courts brought the JPs in, like when we were evaluating like the security and the changes like with SB 42, I think it was, the JPs have been very appreciative of I think those opportunities.
They did an analysis there, and we have it on our committee now, one of the constables is part of our committee. So yes, thank you for bringing it up. We absolutely will make sure that we'll start reaching out and include them in our universe.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
and again, apologies. I'm so
problem,
sorry.
sir. Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Thank you, Judge.
Sorry, Jessica. Thank you.
Item number 9, with a correction for the Budget and Fiscal Policy Department. Discuss and take appropriate action regarding funding for the Internal Control Study, Section 1, RFQ 19-030. Funding is available in General Fund, County Admin, Contract Services General. Further approve the reallocation of funds from General Fund, G Admin, Professional Services Contingency to General Fund, County Admin, Contract Services General.
Judge, Commissioner, this request is for funding for what we call Section 1 or Assessment 1 of the RFQ for to evaluate current practices and structure in countywide functions for risk of financial fraud, identify and provide report on weaknesses in current financial practices and internal controls governing financial operations, including checks and balance systems and operating structure, and suggest improvements, including recommended policies and procedures for county consideration. So we went out on an RFP. This was a 2-scope RFQ. So the first part of the RFQ is the scope that I just explained to you. This is the section that I call my section of the RFQ. And then Edward has a separate section of the RFQ. We're not discussing Edward's section of the RFQ at all right now. So when we went out, the proposals were evaluated. We selected the highest rated proposal and we started negotiating with them on what they proposed. In order to proceed, if we want to continue with this portion of this study, originally we had budgeted this at $60,000. It's been in the budget a couple of years. The proposal, in order to, after negotiating and getting down to what we think is a reasonable proposal, we would need an additional $34,000 to award this. So I wanted to ask if the court would be willing to authorize us that additional $34,000 from the contingency account that was read into the record to proceed with this study. And what we will get out of it, we will actually get out, let me back up here. We'll actually get out a review of processes, and then we'll get a report and a presentation on the results of the work that the company does. We'll get updated policy recommendations, and we'll get updated best practice recommendations, and any opportunities that they see for improvement of it for internal controls for the county.
Just as a reminder, I guess, what is the area, I guess, that you see the biggest benefit to a particular department or operations, or could you just give an example of what?
Sure, yes, sir. So overall, we have an internal audit division that will come in and look at what we do. But what they'll do is they come in and they look at what we're doing and they say, you don't have any written procedures or policies about, the one that's easy to pick off is inventory control. So we run a golf pro shop, for example. And the golf pro shop is staffed by golf employees, like the golf pro and his staff. And they'll say, well, you need inventory control policies, so that we know that when products are received in, that we keep a good inventory of them, and we know when they're sold, and so we can account for all of our inventory. Well, so the audit comes back and says, you need a policy on this. Well, we have people who are not like internal control experts being expected to write that policy. And not only that, it shouldn't be one policy for the golf course and a different policy for the sports park pro shop if we ever get to that point, or it doesn't matter if it's inventory of computer monitors. There should be some uniform county policies on these types of issues.
Those best practices,
Right.
which is more likely to happen
Right.
externally.
Deposits. One of the issues that this even stemmed from, you all, I don't remember how many of you all were on the court when this happened, but we had an employee who had a change cup in their desk, and they got disciplined for using some money out of the change cup, but we had no policies on, and that change cup came from money they found in confiscated cars.
Right.
And the employee got disciplined, and then we lost an appeal, I think. I don't remember all the details, but we had, one of the issues was we have no policies on miscellaneous funds like that, and handling those. I have a whole list of types of issues that have occurred that we want them to evaluate. Another example was a department hosts a training and charges to do the training. And again, we have no rules on how do you manage that incoming unexpected revenue, and what do you do with it. In this particular case, the department used the money and bought items for the training. And I don't think they should have. I think they should have deposited the money with the auditor's office and gone through purchasing to purchase items for the training. That would have been a proper protocol. And they issued receipts out of a receipt book they bought at Staples, which again is not good internal controls. So that's an example, and I mean, those are minors. They're also like, from an HR perspective, we've had some pretty significant issues with both pay and benefits and reconciling of those. And so we need them to analyze those processes and give us some best practices to make sure we do have our checks and balances in place in the department. There's been several things over time, even like our boards and how our boards are doing purchases or recommending items. Part of this started when we also had a board who was managing its own bank account, separate from county funds, not running anything. They would just submit for reimbursement.
So these are all policies. We'll look at every, well, that's quite.
And they won't be able to do for this amount, but we're gonna have them do some broad county-wide and look at what our most highest risk
I
areas
was
are.
gonna say for that amount, that seemed.
Yes, sir. And separately from this, Edward is evaluating his section of the RFQ, which has even more best practices and procedure documenting for his office, which I know his is a bigger lift than this section, but I do hope it's something that we'll be able to get, even if it has to be done in like a couple phases, where we have to do it maybe over a couple fiscal years. I really think for the long term, we're very fortunate that we have people who have a lot of knowledge in the auditor's office, but documenting their procedures and best practices, it's something for the long-term security of this county, this organization, we need to try to get that completed also. So, but we would request that the court allow us to have a transfer of $34,000 from professional services contingencies to complete this project.
Move to approve. Second.
Commissioner Bettis?
Aye.
Commissioner Loud?
Aye.
Commissioner Stuff?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Judge Solomon?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to go ahead and go back to item number 2, public comments. We do have Mr. Ramon Bracamontes here to speak.
We're gonna need just 1 second while he brings
I
the
turned
screens
back
back
on. I'm
on.
like, we're done.
We have a quick item to close our last meeting of the decade.
That's
Way
it,
to go,
right
Barbara.
there. She summed
I
it
know,
up in
right?
one quick sentence. I saw you turning it off and I should have said something.
Wow, isn't it?
Come on,
This is something.
I had a bet with my staff, we'd be done by noon, so.
You will be.
I'm going.
You will be if Wally can get this back
Whatever
up.
you can do to help.
I'm on it.
5 minutes.
Ramon, you gotta go to National Space, where'd you go?
It's not that, it's a video.
I know. Here we go. That's quick.
Y'all have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Take care of the holidays.
Before we set our sights on 2020, we must take a moment to talk about this past year. 2019 will go down as the year where our destiny was set by the adoption of a new mission statement and the creation of a 5-year strategic plan. But at the same time, 2019 was a year that tested us. In March, we lost Deputy Peter Herrera. Throughout the year, we helped manage one of the largest migrant influxes in modern history. And in August, our community was shaken to its core by a mass shooting at Walmart. Through it all, our county family stood tall and strong. It is what we do.
No matter what happens, we can definitely handle it. The HR culture here is unlike any other that I've worked with, any other entities. Everyone is so willing to help you, and we're all willing to grow each other, which is something that I truly admire from this department. And in my honesty, being a public servant is extremely proudful for the County of El Paso.
As public servants, we at the county go above and beyond. The county's economic future is promising with the establishment of a $3 million Economic Impact Fund. As we continue our partnership with UTEP to build an aerospace research center, the Fabens Airport hangar was outfitted with heating and cooling. We paved more than 60 miles of roadways and started the expansion of East Lake Boulevard and Pelicano Drive. And 2019 will be known as the year the county made a definitive effort to protect its historical assets.
I love being a part of the county family. Our economic development team has gone through quite a lot of changes. We're not only trying to attract people to El Paso to come and consume and take part in our assets and everything that we have to offer from a quality of life perspective, but also addressing the folks that already live here and making sure that they reap the benefits of our quality of life efforts, if you will.
Some other quality of life improvements include the construction of water and wastewater systems, improving healthcare services at the jail, and revamping the criminal justice system, which other counties are attempting to duplicate.
I think it's awesome. I've been here 4 years, so for us to be in a position where we're actually leading the way for other bigger counties, I think it really puts El Paso County on the map here in Texas.
Not only do we lead in pretrial services, the county has invested in a modern $6 million voting system that provides a backup paper ballot. The county also offers nursing parents some privacy with the installation of 2 lactation pods, or mom pods, at the courthouse. Along with caring for our constituents, we also care for our employees with team building activities such as the annual Employee Recognition Luncheon, the Halloween contest, and the Employee Picnic. And for the first time, the county participated in the Thanksgiving Day Parade.
I like building the float because it actually challenged. It was a challenge. First of all, with the people. Second of all, to work with your hands and actually show a little bit more of your knowledge that you're not only a regular driver.
The Parks and Recreation Department is our connection to the community, with the department offering fishing contests, concerts, golf tournaments, new playgrounds, the 4th of July fireworks, and the Christmas lights at the lake. The sports park continues to be the region's best baseball venue, with more than 5,500 players.
We've had more teams sign up each season. It's like a family, honestly. For the past 6 years, we've grown together. It's helped me become a better employee and a better person and give great customer service to everyone.
Customer service is what this county is all about. And thanks to the work you do, our employees understand that.
To my bosses, I would like to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to be a part of the county for so many years and for giving me the confidence I need with myself and with patrons as well.
I came from the state of Texas. I was a state employee. I was a child support officer for almost 4 years. And honestly, I can say leaving the state to come work for the county was, in my eyes, the best decision I've made.
I love the close-knit family of it. You can see it when we go to the company picnics. Whenever I had not seen a company picnic in many, many years ago, probably since I was like 7 years old, going to a company picnic with my father. But you can see how close-knit this family is, and I think that this definitely has help the county grow and become to who we are now.
I love my job. I've been here long and I'm thinking of staying here for a long time.
I would say thank you for taking a chance on me. I'm still 2 years later very, very happy and thrilled to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to help show off El Paso and tell our story.
Okay, that was worth it.
Yeah.
12 o'clock.
That's a quick thing.
Thank you all for what you
Thank
do.
you. That was great.
Thank
Good-
you,
good
Ramon.
job.
Great
Thanks,
work.
Ramon.
Caesar.
Thank you, Caesar. Great narrating.
Recognize that voice.
You're gonna be on
And the
radio
IT
and
team,
TV.
Alexis.
Yes,
Gotta get
yes.
the voice.
Thanks to the IT.
You know Alexis.
That's very
You're on
nice.
Alexis.
Yeah. It was very nice. Thank you, Lucky. Happy holidays, everybody.
What's crazy to me is that we're going into 2020, which used to be this TV show into the long future when I was a kid.
Thank you. Thank you all for all the support you give us day in, day out. Thank you.
Judge, Commissioners, happy holidays, happy New Year, safe.
Likewise.
Time like families.
Thank you.
And may all you be blessed. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you.
This completes today's meeting at 12:01.
Can I shut down?